Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order the Ventura County Planning Commission. Would you please rise and face the flag of the United States? Place your hand over your heart and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Before I ask for the roll, please, at this time, put your cell phones on stun or vibrate mode. At this time, I'll have the clerk please call the roll.
Commissioner Callie?
Present.
Commissioner Dukas?
Here.
Commissioner Wessner?
Present.
Commissioner Onstadt?
Here.
Commissioner Rodriguez?
Here.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Before I go to public comments, I do not anticipate us being here that long, but there is a 3-hour time limit in parking lot G, which is to my right out here. It is the normal course of business. We usually take a break about 10:15. I will try to remind you, they will ticket after 3 hours. All right, so just a caution up front. All right, item number 4, public comments. This is the section set aside for comments by any member of the public. For any matter not on the agenda today, please be advised that under the Government Code of the State of California, known as the Brown Act, we can receive information, ask basic questions, but we cannot act on anything. Do I have anything as far as public comments? Hearing none, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. July 7th, 2015. Commissioners?
Move adoption of the minutes.
Second?
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, item number 6, approval of July 16th.
I just wanted to be reflected that I didn't vote because I wasn't there.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Are we supposed to be doing this on the...
I don't see it coming up.
Okay. Yeah, it's for our technology where we vote for it. There we go.
There we go.
There we go. All right. Approval of the minutes for July 16th. Commissioners? I have approval. Second?
I'll second.
A second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we're moving too fast for it. She's getting... There we go. Good job. All right. Now that we've got the...
Yeah, I thought I was. I voted the last time.
Okay. He hasn't... Commissioner Rodriguez hasn't come up on the 2 votes.
I didn't come up. I came up on the first one, didn't I?
Yeah.
Didn't come up.
Okay, you'll have to stay after class.
There's my hand.
Okay. Well, the clerk, you can take care of that. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. With that, we'll move on to item number 7, consent agenda item PL 13-0039. Planning staff report back to the Planning Commission on condition compliance on the apricot farm. Staff? Oh, no, just, yeah, please come forward. Your name, please.
Good morning. I'm Becky Linder. I was a staff planner for the conditional use permit PL 13-0039 for Apricot Farms. And I don't really have anything to report back to you. One of the owners, she had a baby. And so they didn't do any events, but they hope to have some events in 2016, and we'll report back if you would like. We don't have to, but request was to report back in 1 year from last year, so nothing to report, no events.
Okay, we appreciate that, and I know you weren't properly prepared, but there was, I think, a discussion. That's one of the things we need to consider. I know of my past history of this. Sometimes we give use permits and things like that. Market down, turns down whatever, and the entitlement gets to the point nobody does anything. Staff that properly brings back the report, nothing's happened. So I think as commissioners, and I think Commissioner Dukas discussed that also, is that maybe we should put a different phrasing in there for staff that once they proceed to bring the report back.
Yes, we can do that, no problem. So we'll do that.
Okay, any other questions since nothing happened?
So would you like me to report back in 1 year?
I would appreciate
Okay.
if they begin.
If they begin. If they don't begin, then don't report back?
Just let the director know and she can tell us.
Oh, she can tell you? Okay. Because I think Commissioner Dukas was particularly concerned about movie nights, and they haven't started those yet.
Right, and so
That I know of.
And so I was just, lesson learned. Instead of saying come back in a year, come back as appropriate
Okay. All right.
when something happens.
Yes.
All right, thank
Commissioner
you.
Ossoff, did you have a question?
Doesn't the CUP lapse within a period of time?
I couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry. Doesn't CUP lapse after a period of time if they don't take any action?
I believe so. They did get their zoning clearance for use inauguration,
Okay.
and they may have had classes. I'm not sure about that even, but no farm events, no movie nights, special events, or anything like that. So it hasn't lapsed. They did do their use inauguration.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, then the commission will just file and receive the non-report.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Linda. Okay. Item number 8, PL 15-0095, County Initiative, Proposed Amendment to the General Plan refers to Santa Rosa Valley. This I find enjoyable. The case planner is the director, Mr. Christopher Stevens. Welcome back, Chris.
Well, good morning, Chair Westner, members of the Commission. For the record, I am Chris Stevens, the case planner on the project you have before you today, the Circle of Life, right?
Yes.
Anyway, what we have before you today, I think, is a relatively simple item. It is to propose some amendments to the general plan to incorporate references to the Santa Rosa Valley Trail Plan, which was adopted by the Board of Supervisors last December. So what I want to do real quickly, since I had it available for my presentation to the board in December, a quick summary of the trail plan. Won't take more than a couple of minutes, and then a summary of the proposal before you. So the trail plan actually was a project initiated by the community. They came to the board a number of times requesting the preparation of a trail plan to formalize what is today a rather informal trail system in the Santa Rosa Valley. So it took a number of years, and we got to the point where an entity that was formed in the Santa Rosa Valley called Santa Rosa Valley Trails Incorporated stepped up to the plate the way it counts by providing funds to the county to hire consultants to actually prepare the plan and the associated environmental document. So with that, the board approved us moving forward with the preparation of the plan. The plan itself was, as you can see here, in essence, an assessment of the system that was out there. As I say, the informal system operated entirely by Santa Rosa Valley Trails Incorporated. It's something that they have done, working out arrangements with property owners on their own for that system that is very well used and very well liked out in the community. So we did an assessment of the trail system, took a look at the physical constraints and identified gaps and things of that nature, and the result was a trail plan, and that's what you see here on the map. We worked through the Santa Rosa Valley Municipal Advisory Council, the MAC. I had a number of meetings out there and kind of workshopped the plan as we went through the process. And in addition to the system identification, the plan developed some design standards and guidelines to help guide the future development of the trail system such that there may be or may not be. That all depends on how things work out. the board did not identify or allocate any funding for actual construction of any of these trails. This is really a plan out there so that if and when these trails develop, they'll be uniform and there'll be a system in place so that it operates as a cohesive system. So included in the plan were things, a lot of design guidelines here, talking about width, height, clearance, landscaping, things of that nature. Also took a look at there's a few on-road bicycle paths identified. Worked with our Public Works Agency very carefully to identify how those might look on the system so that everyone the community was aware of what this might look like, as I said, if and when it's developed. It also included operation and maintenance guidelines. Some of the property owners adjacent to these trails are very interested in how they're operated, as you might imagine, and I think bike trails have certainly come up in front of the board a number of times. I don't know if you've been grappling with that issue as well, but these are all issues, as you might imagine, as a neighbor, you'd be very interested in. So, as I said, that was adopted by the board in December, and their direction at that time was for staff to prepare amendments to the general plan to incorporate references to the trail plan so that it's more formally recognized within our planning documents. And that's what is before you today. We prepared those. They're in your packet. They are some references in the goals, policies, and programs portion of the general plan, as well as some within the public facilities and services appendix. They're pretty straightforward. They're just rather modest references to the plan themselves. Probably the most substantive change is to the table, which lists the recreational facilities, and now this system is included on there. And the intention here is, by that formal recognition, is to give that system a little higher standing so that if and when there are development proposals out in the valley, we can look to the general plan. We make that general plan consistency finding and ensure that whatever those proposals are, they don't compromise the ability to develop the trail in the future. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, before that, since this is a county-wide matter, I don't believe that disclosures are necessary by the commissioners. Am I correct, County Council?
No, I don't feel it's necessary
Yeah,
in this
I don't
case.
see any specific conflicts. Okay, with that, any questions of the director? Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
I might
Director.
add that we received some emails yesterday. Did the commissioners receive those? Okay, very, very good.
Any questions of the director? Yes. Commissioner Onstott.
I had a question. I don't understand why the proposed amendment is categorically exempt from CEQA. It would seem to introduce a significant use. I just didn't understand, nor did the documents provide me with the information that led me to believe it's categorically exempt. Could you address that?
In part, that is because the project itself and the trail plan was adopted by the board in December. It had a negative declaration and had an environmental review, mitigated negative declaration, excuse me. So there are mitigation measures within that document that carry forward. So the review of the environmental impacts of the trails themselves has been completed and certified by the board.
Okay.
The action before you today is simply the language changes within the general plan, which were determined to be categorically exempt.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Chris? Oh, the only one I have, Chris, and it's probably real esoteric legal. Okay, the fact that we have now incorporated into our general plan a specific nonprofit. And one of the first goal is to acquire, develop. I'm concerned that there may be, that's 4.10.1, a certain implied eminent domain power to this particular entity. Like, I want to deal with a private, I want to get an easement across your property. Oh, by the way, we're in the general plan.
Right.
Can you address that?
Yeah, there are statements in the plan itself that reference the fact that there is no intention, nor does the plan contemplate use of eminent domain for the acquisition of these properties, should that come to be.
But do they have the power?
The
Nonprofit.
nonprofit? No, they do not, to my knowledge. And council may want to.
Well, we certainly couldn't delegate that power
Right,
to them as a
right.
county entity, and so that could in no way be implied. To my knowledge, there's no statutory legislative level authorizing this nonprofit to exercise the powers of eminent domain.
Yeah, but the reason it comes to my mind is we disallowed that wedding use out there, and part of the trail system was being allowed by that property owner. And so in my mind, I could see the conflict of, all right, I got a private property owner that was allowing you use and now says you can't. And so can this nonprofit say, we want that easement back?
No,
Okay.
no, they can't.
All right. Any further questions other than my silly esoteric ones? He puts a tie on him, and all of a sudden he becomes senatorial on me. Okay. Any final comments, Chris? Anything else?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, although I would like to thank Aaron Angstrom, planning staff, for helping me through the process.
All right. I don't have any speaker cards on this matter. Is there anybody in the public that would like to speak? Not hearing any? Okay. Commissioners, I will close the public hearing. What is your pleasure?
I'd like to move staff recommendation.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, are we prepared to vote? Sorry, Anna. We moved too fast for you.
No, you're good.
There you go. Mr. Director, you're 1-0 in finals.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. Okay. All right, moving on to the reason everybody's here today. Item number 9, PL 115-0004. Applicant requests a variance to allow construction of a detached metal accessory storage unit in Ojai. Case planner is Matthew Salter. Did I say that right, Matt? Salter?
Morning. Sauter.
Did I say Salter correctly?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Please announce your name for the folks at home listening to us.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Matt Sauter with the Ventura County Planning Division. I'm the case planner for case number PL 15-0004, the requested variance before us today. So just for some background, the project is located on Sissar Road, just north of Highway 150 near the Summit School and Stagecoach Station General Store. Here's an aerial view of the property. Currently developed with a single-family dwelling with detached carport and detached garage. The unfinished structure in this aerial is the storage structure under consideration today. So, and some site photos. This
Excuse me, sir. Does that correctly depict the size of the lot
that is
and
correct.
the property line there, where the house or the structure comes up to it? Is that?
There is, Commissioner Onstadt, there is some, the line has a certain thickness on there, but it
Right.
does reflect the property lines, yes.
Thank you.
So moving on to some site photos. This is a view of the property from the driveway looking west, so into the property from Sissar Road. This is a view to the northwest, south on Sissar Road from the driveway of the neighbor to the immediate south, showing the storage structure under consideration today. The red structure is the detached garage, and the white is the single-family dwelling currently on site. This is a view from the front looking to the south of the storage structure and its relationship with the garage and oak tree. This depicts the relationship between the storage structure, its foundation, and the existing development on the property. So an additional photo of how the property fits together, with the dwelling on the left there, the white with the red deck. This is the relationship between the storage structure and the nearest oak tree on site. So you can see the cleared land off to the right. And this depicts the relationship looking to the west of the structure with the property line to the nearest neighbor to the south. So that fence right there depicts the property line. Then this is looking to the back of the property, storage structure on the left, distribution electrical line moving across the center, and with the open cleared area to the back of the property. And this is an internal view of the storage structure under consideration today. So for some history and background, The subject property is zoned RE2AC, which is rural exclusive, 2-acre minimum lot size, and the current development is an approximately 1,500 square foot single-family dwelling, 480 square foot detached garage, and 375 square foot detached carport. So moving through the timeline of the project, on December 18th of 2013, Building and Safety took in an estimate, case number EST-C13-001212, for the design for a detached metal storage structure on the property. This was withdrawn at the end of 2013 when full plans were not submitted for review and permitting by the end of the year. So those cases are automatically withdrawn at the end of the year if they're not completed for estimates. So on December 19th, the following day, the Planning Division issued zoning clearance ZC13-1192 for a 900 square foot detached storage structure using the standard building and safety plans plate B14. So the accessory storage structure was treated as analogous to a detached garage, which is the closest thing to kind of a quick approval. So on the back of the zoning clearance, we have some regulations for the structure. It's structure number 3 here, an accessory structure to a dwelling not for human habitation with a maximum height of 15 feet. So, and then subsequently on February 25th, the structural and fire plans were submitted for building and safety for review. There's a slight typo there. It should read CD14-00163. And then on May 21st, the stamp plans were issued and picked up. So, and then following that, inspections of the foundation and stormwater were approved on October 2nd, and then the slab for the structure was inspected on October 15th and approved. The structure was then inspected on November 26th of 2014. Oh, there's a slight typo under the slab. It should read 2014. That didn't occur in the future. So, and a stop work order was issued because the building under construction was inconsistent with the zoning clearance due to being over height. So on December 13th of 2014, the Planning Division issued a nullification letter for the zoning clearance. This provided 2 options: to either demolish the structure or to apply for a variance to height limits and setback requirements. Additionally, a third option in the final paragraph, this is exhibit number 4, included the option for an appeal of the nullification letter, or the nullification of the zoning clearance. The applicants elected to apply for the variance under consideration here today. So the project description, as we in the lead-in, is to allow the construction and completion and use of the 900 square foot, 30-foot average height detached storage structure, so 32 feet at the peak, 28 at the eaves, 30 feet at the midpoint, located within 3 feet of a side lot line. So in the plans, these are the plans that were submitted to the Planning Division for issuance of the zoning clearance. Here's the site plan. You can see the new shed as the detached storage structure there, with the relationship of the property lines and the other structures. So, and then this is plate B14 for a detached garage. This depicts, kind of the quick approval process for standard structures used by building and safety. So, then this is the site plan submitted to building and safety for consideration of the building permit. See, it's a little cleaned up, but very similar to the one issued for the zoning clearance. However, this is a plate from the structural designs that were submitted for the building permit, depicting the 32-foot peak, 28-foot at the eaves. So there's a slight discrepancy between what was submitted to planning and building and safety.
Excuse me, can you go back to the slide after their site plan? You had the standard
Yes.
form. Okay, because that's not in my packet. Is anybody else missing that?
I believe Dan, is this, including it in the presentation, it's an exhibit for the case?
Right. Commissioner Chair, Commissioner Kelly, yeah, this wasn't a separate exhibit. This was just included in Mr. Souter's presentation here. So if you want a copy of this so you can read it more closely, we could maybe print out a copy.
I'm just trying to determine where the height description is and how obvious that would be to somebody who was using the form.
Sure. Perhaps Mr. Souter could point out, the font's really small on the screen,
Yeah.
but perhaps he could point out where it depicts the height. You can see it's on the right-hand side.
So,
Yeah, right-hand side, if you're facing it from my
I don't
direction.
have the laser pointer doesn't seem to be.
And I think it's important to clarify that when the applicant approached the planning division and applied for the zoning clearance, they only had a site plan. They didn't have building elevations, which we typically require. However, if an applicant is going to stay within the confines of these standards that the Building and Safety Division has adopted for these quick reviews of these types of accessory structures, we were kind of doing the applicant a favor and saying, okay, we won't require formal building elevations to issue the zoning clearance. However, you must stay within that 15-foot height limit, and you must stay within the confines of the building safety standard plate requirements. Based upon that, we issued the zoning clearance. After that, when they came back to building safety to submit their plans, that was where they differed from what was approved in the zoning clearance and what was what's shown here in this the plate B14 standards for building and safety. In other words, they deviated from this when they submitted their plans to building and safety.
I have a question.
Yeah, I got
Yeah,
that.
before that, let the record reflect that Commissioner Cali has been provided a copy, hard
Yeah,
copy.
it's not really legible. Thank you.
So she can have a few minutes to study it while we take questions. Commissioner Ronstadt.
Walking through the plans that were submitted before the zoning clearance, did you have any reason to believe, or did county have any reason to believe the structure would be any higher than 15 feet?
Commissioner Onstadt, I don't believe so. No.
Okay. And what I just heard was there's a standard plan. It included that 15-foot height, and they have signed or acknowledged something that indicated they would stay within those specifications?
That is correct.
Subsequent to the zoning clearance, did the county give them any reason to believe that they could legally or could they proceed with that higher building? I saw one plan said was stamped approved, and when it had the height on it, can they make an argument that the county consented to a modification of that original design?
Commissioner Onstadt, Building and Safety approved the submitted building plans as they were, inconsistent with what was approved in the zoning clearance.
Okay.
Commissioner Onstadt?
Sure.
Can I answer? My name is Winston Wright. I'm acting director in Kim Perlhart's absence. I also manage the counter and have had some discussions and dealings with this particular situation at the counter. And the plans that were submitted and approved by the planning counter differed than what went to building and safety. And there was, I have to admit, an error in staff in that there was no stamping of the building and safety set stamp by planning staff. And you can see that there's no planning approval on that set of plans that went to building and safety, which normal safeguards, when are followed, that's not the procedure, is that the plans would have been stamped and given to building and safety, but that was a step that was missed in this particular situation.
Okay. Going through this process, if they wanted to change the design, what would they have done or should have done to bring this matter before the planning or before your counter, for instance? What do they do to change it?
Well, you can revise an existing zoning clearance, or you can get a new one. In this particular situation, they would not have been granted an approval for a ministerial zoning clearance if they came forward with a 30-foot tall building. They would have to have had set that building back, and there would have been, as the staff report explains, a requirement for the house to be set back 15 feet and the structure itself to be set back 20 feet from the side property line in order to jump up to the higher allowed structure height of 35 feet. So there is an allowance in Ventura County to go higher than 25, but the development standards for side yard setbacks are different. So that would have been the scenarios. They would have to revise their plans and their project and even probably cut back part of their house in order for them to be allowed to go up to a maximum of 35 feet. And I worked with the Bolts before to look into a scenario where that could be accomplished so that the variance would not need to be submitted, and including looking into the ability of doing lot line adjustments with their neighbors, and it just didn't turn out to be a feasible arrangement for them given the number of arrangements that would have required to accomplish that.
Okay. We're sort of focusing on height, but what about the setback requirement?
The setback requirement for an accessory structure that exceeds the maximum 15-foot setback, or excuse me, 15-foot height, would have been, they have to be 20 feet from the side property line, not 3.
And it's 3 feet now. Is that
That's-
what we're looking at?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rodriguez, you had a question?
Yeah, on the original site plan that was submitted, as it was submitted, did it sit on the property line as we see it now? And did it conform with the setback, front setback that's required as it was submitted?
Commissioner Rodriguez, for accessory structures that are at the 15-foot height, there is an exception allowing for reducing the side setback to an interior lot to 3 feet. That's correct.
So if they'd have built within the 15-foot parameter, the setback would have been fine.
That's correct.
Any other questions at this time? Mr. Souter, please.
Thank you. So moving on to CEQA, we find that the project is statutorily exempt instead of categorically exempt due to sections 15061B4 and 15270 for projects that are disapproved or recommended for denial by a public agency. Moving on to the findings. With variances, so they're based on discretionary decisions, like before you today, and may be granted to allow deviations from ordinance regulations governing such development factors as setbacks, height, lot coverage, lot area and width, sides, off-street parking, landscape and wall fencing, and screening standards. So we must make the findings for all 4 of the following standards. So standard 1, that there are special circumstances or exceptional characteristics applicable to the subject property with regard to size, shape, topography, location, or surroundings, which do not apply to generally comparable properties in the same vicinity and zone. So this would be in cases where there are streams or cliffs that would restrict the development on the property. So we began with an analysis of the surrounding area. Within a quarter mile of the property, there are 91 parcels. 28 of those parcels had the same zoning, rural exclusive 2-acre minimum lot size as the subject parcel, which range in size from 0.49 to 4.73 acres. The subject parcel is 2/3 of an acre in size, which is below the mean of 1.6 acre for the surrounding area, but within the range of property sizes for the same zoning. So, and then following this, our analysis moved to, could the current lot support an accessory structure over height without a variance authorized by your planning commission? So as we stated before, accessory structures are limited to 15 feet in height, and detached accessory structures not used for human habitation may be constructed within 3 feet of a side lot line. So, and as Mr. Wright stated before, provided that an accessory structure is set back 20 feet from all property lines, it may exceed 15 feet in height, but it shall not exceed the maximum allowed height of the principal structure unless a discretionary permit is issued. So, we go back to the aerial view of the property. And the blue that we've added on there is a 20-foot buffer from all property lines. You can see the existing house, the current location of the storage structure, location of safety areas for the trees, and we've identified a potential alternative location for the storage structure on the property. So outside the 20-foot buffer that we discussed before. So finding that.
Can you back up for just a second?
Yeah.
Where is Cesar Road at?
Cesar Road is on the
in relation to that
right.
property line?
The parallelogram on the right is the concrete driveway off of Cesar Road. So this is solely within the property lines. The exterior border is the property.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Dukas, you have a question?
Yes.
I'd like a clarification. That still would be subject to a discretionary approval, though, correct? Or that would be ministerial. They could go higher than 15 feet, no higher than, just if you could just clarify that for me. They still would not need a discretionary approval?
Yeah, that's correct. So what this is showing is that provided that setback 20 feet, you can go up higher than that 15-foot height limitation, but no higher than what's allowed for the principal structure, which in this case is a single-family dwelling. So in other words, this is showing that you could have a structure of that height, size, dimensions outside the setback areas without some sort of discretionary approval from your planning commission.
Okay, and it doesn't matter that the existing house is not that high, it's just what's allowed in the zone?
Yeah, go for it.
So in this particular situation, since the house is not set back 15 feet, the house can be 25 feet, so the structure could have been 25 feet, not 30. But that would have been into average peak, so there would have been a way of them adjusting it to be 25 feet tall than average.
And I'm going to ask another question later on having to do with, like a soils analysis for such a beefy structure, but I'll ask that later.
Okay, thank you. So for finding 1, the subject property does not exhibit any special characteristics unique within its neighborhood by shape or size or topography that would prevent a building of similar size and shape from being developed on the property without requiring a variance from your commission. So therefore, the first finding cannot be made. Moving on to standard number 2, that granting the requested variance will not confer a special privilege inconsistent with the limitations upon other properties in the same vicinity and zone. So as we just stated, there aren't any unique features of the property preventing permitting of a structure of similar size and shape on the property. And as submitted by the applicant, I believe it's exhibit number 7, there are a number of photos submitted with their application depicting a number of structures in the area of Cesar Road that are generally taller structures. However, in review of these structures, most of them were principal structures, so single-family dwellings or the general store. So all of these being principal structures are allowed to be 25 feet in height, and so just by their nature. None of them are accessory structures that would require additional permitting to go over 15 feet. So this is substantially taller than any other accessory structure in the vicinity of the project site, and therefore would confer a special privilege not available to other properties in the neighboring vicinity onto the property under consideration. So therefore, based on those two factors, finding number 2 cannot be made. Standard 3, that the strict application of the zoning regulations as they apply to the subject property. Oh.
There are accessory structures of that height in the neighborhood, but there are other structures of that height, comparable height in the area.
Commissioner Kelly, that's correct. So principal structures in the area are up to 25 feet.
Okay.
However, there are no accessory structures that we were able to identify in the area above 15 feet tall.
But this doesn't tower above in the landscape of other structures in the area.
That's correct.
Thank you.
So, moving on to standard number 3.
Sorry, Mr. Soller.
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez.
Just continuing on Commissioner Callie's question, those other similar structures in height in the area, are those residential structures or are those outbuildings?
Commissioner Rodriguez, those are principal structures such as single-family dwellings that are 2 stories tall.
Okay.
So they're allowed to be 25 feet. And then as well as the Stagecoach Station General Store, which is the principal structure on its lot and therefore is allowed to be up to 25 feet in height. So they're not accessory structures, they're the principal structures on their subject properties. So therefore allowed to be up to 25 feet. Thank you. So standard number 3, is the strict application of the zoning regulations, the non-coastal zoning ordinance, as they apply to the subject property will result in practical difficulties or unnecessary hardships inconsistent with the general purpose of such regulations. So, as we've discussed previously, we've identified an alternative location on the site that wouldn't require a variance from your commission for it to be permitted. And so, the practical difficulties and hardships described by the applicant arise not from the implementation of the zoning ordinance, but so therefore this finding cannot be made because the ordinance provides relief from the height restrictions in the ordinance. So therefore this finding cannot be made. Finally, standard 4, that the granting of such variance will not be detrimental to the public health, safety, or general welfare, nor to the use, enjoyment, or valuation of neighboring properties. So while neighboring landowners have a reasonable expectation that the surrounding properties will be developed consistently with the general plan and ordinance, the use of the structure to store books is unlikely to adversely affect the health and safety of the local community. So therefore, this finding can be made. So we've only been able to make one of the 4 required findings for issuance or recommendation of issuance of a variance in this case. So public noticing. Notice of this meeting was provided to the Ventura County Star and residents within 300 feet of the subject property. Additionally, the planning staff notified, included in the notification, signatories of the applicant's submitted petition. So, finally, the planning division received 3 letters of support from Fred Chevalier, who's the constructor of the building, Ulrich Brugger from the Ojai Retreat, and Ellen Hall from Meditation Mount. And following issuance of the staff report, 25 letters from neighbors along Cesar Road were provided to the planning division and you as, I believe, Exhibit A. And all of those letters are in support of the issuance of the variance. So the recommended actions are to, 1, certify that the commission has reviewed and considered the staff report and all exhibits, has considered all comments received from the public. 2, find that the project is statutorily exempt from CEQA pursuant to the sections referenced before, and find that the requested variance does not meet all of the standards to approve a variance set forth in the non-coastal zoning ordinance based on the substantial evidence. And to deny the variance case PL 15-0004 and specify that the clerk of the planning commission is the custodian of the record. So, and I'm available for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Souders. Any additional comments from staff at this time? Hearing none. All right. Any questions of staff at this time? Commissioner Callan?
I think I do. Okay, first of all, how tall is a barn, just for reference?
I would have to know the specific barn, Commissioner.
Okay.
Apologize.
And then as...
Commissioner, I think we might have... If
Commissioner Callie, Winston Wright, again, a barn can be 15 feet tall, but it has the same, it's an accessory agricultural structure. So the same provisions for height apply to a barn that would be for a storage building. So you can have an average height of 15 unless you set it back 20 feet from the property line, then it can go to 25. And there are plenty of examples in Ventura County where the barn is at 25 feet tall, and that's an average. And so you measured average height from grade to the average pitch of the road, so the actual tip of the roof could be taller than 25 depending on the pitch. And so the average is calculated from the midpoint of the roof, not the top of the roof.
Thank you. That was very... Okay. And then as far as comparable properties, I know you said you looked at the surrounding. It just seems like a lot of those parcels, being in a rural area, are unique sizes and shapes and configurations with the trees and the location of the road and the property lines. So that's just... I don't know if that's a comment or a question about the nature of, that it can be considered that they're comparable to other sites in the area. I don't know. I guess that's not really a question. Okay. And then just also, okay, so never mind. My other is more of a comment, so I won't go there. Thanks.
You'll have plenty of time. This is now for questions of the technical report of the staff. Any other questions at this time? Oh, Commissioner Cowan.
I do have a question. Since I'm a little bit new to variances, can you tell me, are there any conditions, can a variance be tied to a length of time or an ownership or a use, or is it really just the structure?
Yeah, it depends on how the variance is drafted, because I've seen various variances that they always run with the land, and they always must be associated with a specific development proposal. You can't just have like a blanket running variance. If or when I decide to develop in the future, I want to have a reduced setback. In other words, you have to have a specific development proposal in hand that accompanies the variance, and the variance is associated with that. So in this case, they're applying for the variance for this specific structure. It would run with the land, but it can't, once again, apply to, for example, future buildings that may be constructed or conceived in the future. So if that answers your question.
Okay. All right.
Commissioner?
And then, So it stays with the land even if it's sold, a condition be made that, if it's for a particular purpose, that it then be removed before the land is sold?
County Council, I think you want to weigh in on that.
Yeah, no, this isn't relative to the ownership of the property. It's relative to the structure and the use of the property in this particular case. So there couldn't be a condition where it would be tore down. As Mr. Clement pointed out, it would run with the land.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Rodriguez, you have a question?
Yeah. Cesar Road is a county road. Is that correct? That's correct, isn't it?
I don't believe so. No.
It's a private road? Okay. What is the public's ability or county's ability as it relates to easements for utilities, for example?
Commissioner, I don't know that off the top of my head.
I'm not sure I understand the question. If you could repeat again.
Yeah.
Just in general, though, in this particular case, Cesar Road, because it provides access for more than one lot, then it's considered a road for the purposes of setbacks, is treated the same way as a public road with regard to development of the properties that are adjacent to Cesar Road. So, for example, you have front yard setbacks, which apply to all the lots along there. So it's, for the purposes of the development of the lots along Cesar Road, it's treated roughly the same as a public road, if that makes sense,
okay.
If that gets at what you're asking.
Yeah, and following that concept, then there is some sort of public easement for utility purposes or not?
Commissioner Rodriguez, yes, generally there will be easement in these types of roads, and oftentimes these private roads are mapped roads that have not been accepted by the county for maintenance. So those mapped roads are usually, if you see the easements in them, it's for public access and utilities. Is the general rule when you see those kind of mapped roads when they get recorded. So yes, there are easements and utilities within that roadway for Southern California Edison Gas and the like.
Within the roadway or on either side of the roadway?
It's usually within the right-of-way. So the roadway can be wider, the right-of-way can be wider than the actual asphalt. And we measure from the edge of the easement for setback purposes. But in this particular situation, there's no intrusion within the front yard setback. It's a side yard setback question. So they're plenty far away for the front yard. If they were to come in and ask for a larger, taller building, we wouldn't have a problem granting a taller accessory structure based on its front yard setback. It would be the side yard setback that would be in question.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, hearing none, then we'll take the staff report. At this time, commissioners, we need to disclose. Commissioner Colley, any disclosures?
Well, I see somebody in the audience who turned in a speaker card that I am acquainted with about 20 years ago, but have had no contact with her really since, other than recently running into her somewhere, but no discussion of this topic at all. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Dukas, any disclosures?
I took a drive out to the community yesterday, and my general impression was that this structure was ever so much taller than any other structure in that area, and there are quite a number of homes. I followed the road to its end. I spoke to two different people when I was driving through who thought I was lost, and they offered help. It's a very friendly community, but we didn't have any discussion about the case. I did also go over one street over to see if the structure in question was visible from outside the area, and it is not. But I also noted that this is a really beefy structure. This thing is built for the ages, and I think it's because it's to store something very heavy, books. And so I was, and this was the question that I wanted to ask of staff is when you have something that's outside of what's normally thought of as, a storage shed. When you have a structure, with were there was there a soils report to make sure that the soil could handle this kind of loading? Was there inspection of the footing? How did this get away from the county? That's my disclosure and my question.
Okay. Commissioner Rodriguez?
I'm familiar with the area. Haven't been up there in probably a year and a half, but that's it.
Commissioner Onstott?
I'm well acquainted with the area, having been born and raised in the area and having been up and down Cesar Road any number of times in my lifetime.
The chair has no other disclosures other than the fact that we had a case about 15 years ago regarding a barn next to a property line. I won't mention the district attorney's name who owned the property at that time. So I'm familiar with these large structures too close to somebody else. But as far as this specific property, I have no disclosures. All right. With that, just for those that are, did I see a hand? That are new to the process, we've received the staff report. We have an applicant. The applicant is allowed to present their matter without limitation on time. At that time, anybody in support of the applicant, can speak. And I know a lot of you marked that you oppose the recommended action, so there might be a little confusion on that. Then after those that support the applicant, since it's not an appeal, will be allowed to speak. And then at that time, the applicant can do a final rebuttal, if they so choose. And at that point, we'll receive additional staff comments on what they've heard from the public. And once the commission is satisfied they have enough information, we'll close the public hearing and deliberate. Okay. I do not see a card from either Mr. Bollitt or the other owner of the property. Who is going to speak on behalf of the applicant, or is anyone?
I will, but I forgot to sign the card.
That's quite all right.
I'm sorry.
If you're speaking on behalf of the applicant, please come.
I'm the applicant.
Oh, John?
Yeah.
Please come forward if you're going to speak.
Of course.
No, that's why I'm asking.
Okay.
Just state your name and when you come forward.
Okay. And we have an AV, so just bear with us for 1 second while we
You take your time, John.
set it up. Okay.
Metti le foto dentro. Here. Ok, lì. Tiralo fuori sullo schermo. Ok, va bene lì.
I can see Director Prilhart has not put the appropriate music theme songs I've been requesting for 23 years.
Ok. Ok.
Just for those folks listening at home, they're preparing their PowerPoint for us. So as soon as we get there, we'll begin. Please state your name for the record, John.
So I'm John Bolt, and this is my wife, Nicoletta. And I hope you can hear me okay?
Hear you fine?
Good. So good morning. First of all, my wife, Nicoletta, and I would like to thank Ventura County, especially Matthew, for organizing this public hearing. Accompanying my introductory remarks is a short video which might give you a clearer idea of the subject of our discussion. So let's go with the video, which lasts like 20 seconds or so. So we are actually going north to south along Cesar Road. This is our property, and you can see the blue storage area behind the trees, behind the fence, and behind the car. Then you see the white house, the principal dwelling. and you can also see parts of adjacent properties. And that's just to give you a basic idea of what happens when you walk up Caesar Road. Okay, then we want to switch to a PowerPoint, which also I hope will add for clarification. So what's the problem? According to Ventura County, the building is too high vis-à-vis the necessary setback of 20 feet. A discrepancy which arose because of errors on all sides. Since these errors were committed, and as a result the building was built in good faith, we are asking for a sensible solution. That is a variance, and therefore for the retention of the structure as it now stands. The rationale for any variance would seem to be just that. It's an adjustment to a set of rules informed by common sense and by the common good. But if on the basis of this same set of rules the request for variance is refuted, then this becomes a contradiction in terms, a catch-22, whereby a variance cannot be entertained because it is a variance. Let me spell out 5 basic reasons which we feel justify such a request. And some of them I will be elaborating later. 1. The property is 0.66 acre in size, and yet it is still zoned RE2, rural exclusive, a conjunction making it both unusual from the standpoint of zoning on Caesar Road, and at the same time still subject to the conditions and regulations and benefits which govern the other larger properties on Caesar Road. 2. Miscommunication between administrative departments. As we've just heard, on the 18th of December 2013, the Building and Safety Department of Ventura County issued a building permit for the structure, an important fact which needs to be emphasized. True, on the next day, as planning has just mentioned, we received a construction and demolition permit from the Planning Division, which did indicate the 15-foot height on the back, on the second page. We failed to notice this, and we are responsible for this oversight. However, Building and Safety went on to ratify the initial permit twice more during 2014. And in good faith, without administrative hindrance or redress, we proceeded with the project. Of course, if we'd been aware of the deficiency at the time, we would have planned differently, and we wouldn't be here today. Surely you would agree that because of this departmental error, repeated 3 times, there ought to be room for the consideration of a variance. Point 3. The stop work order of November 2014 came just before the structure was finished and just before the winter rains. Consequently, without the main door installed and the skylights mounted, the structure lay open to the elements, was flooded several times, and many of the metal elements rusted. Point 4. Construction, demolition, and relocation of the entire structure would mean a total expenditure of over $250,000, more than $250,000, for a simple storage unit for books. For us, that denotes a financial burden, not to mention the fact that were the structure to be rebuilt elsewhere on the property, it would degrade, according to us, seriously the visual and scenic values of our community. And 5, indeed, we are part of a very special community on Caesar Road, which has shown its uniform support of the intended use of the project. The structure would become a cultural enhancement to the community, and as such would blend easily into the local environment of foundations and schools. The cultural value of the structure is not to be underestimated. We appreciate the arguments put forward by the Planning Division and wish to elaborate our own viewpoint, which of course diverges and constitutes the motivation for this public hearing today. The reasoning of the Planning Division is clear, but we feel that it does not take into account a number of important facts which have a direct bearing on our request, namely, that the building be kept in its present position and be allowed to fulfill its dedicated purpose. We understand the perceived inconsistency of this project, which the Planning Division has affirmed by going through the many points, and of course I shall be addressing some of them too. Actually, in spite of misunderstandings, we are delighted to see from the planning report that there seems to be common ground and room for agreement. All parties understand that the present structure does not, and I'm quoting from the Planning Division's account, degrade the Ojai Valley in its visual, scenic, or biological context, that it would not increase demand for water, and does not present a high fire risk. The nearest hydrant with 500 gallons per minute is less than 100 feet away, and that in general the project is consistent with most of the needs of the land use policy and meets the development standards for building intensity, as well as the general plan public facilities and services policies. Let us look at the structure in question from the 4 adjacent properties next. This is from the east, from the street. From the north, our neighbor's property from the north. From the south, also our neighbor's property. And from the west, also our neighbor's property. We should emphasize that the structure does not bother our 4 immediate neighbors, and in fact, all manifest support, if not enthusiasm, for the structure, each signing an affirmation to this effect. Moreover, we have received a petition with 40 signatures and a total of 25 supportive letters from neighbors which have been forwarded to Ventura County. For the sake of brevity, we've condensed our appeal for the retention of the building in question into 4 principal arguments coinciding with the main 4 clauses advanced by the staff of the Planning Division, 1, 2, 3, 4, or A, B, C, D. But before examining those clauses, I'd like to trace the sequence which led to this predicament. In the interest of clarity, let us look at the calendar of main events. On the screen here, you can see, I'm sorry about the yellow paper, but it gives you a sense of the stepping stones, so to speak. On the 18th of December 2013, after inspection of our plans, a combination permit for a 900 square foot structure was issued to us by the Department of Building and Safety at Ventura County. Next. As far as I can see, this document should be emphasized in all reports regarding our case. Subsequently, this decision, next, was confirmed by the same department in a receipt for a structural plan review and fire security zone review dated the 25th of February 2014. And then once again, on the 21st of May 2014, and I'll come back to this because it's an important phase. In other words, the Department of Building and Safety gave its consent and the go-ahead 3 times in all. Our hope is that this sequential repetition of misleading information would now prompt Ventura County to redress the balance and make amends by weighing our request for the variance for a discretion. On the 19th of December 2013, we also received the permit from the Planning Division at Ventura County for the construction, demolition, and the sewage setback. Next, please. True as the members of planning have just mentioned, this permit on page 2, highlighted in yellow, did indicate the 15-foot height, which unfortunately we failed to see. And next one, this is the sewage setback also signed. However, 5 months later, on the 21st of May 2014, Building and Safety approved the 26 pages of the metal structure plan from Empire Steel of San Diego, which indicated a height of 32 feet or 28 feet from the eaves. It also approved a site plan. I apologize for the quality, but they were handled a lot by various inspectors. The site plan and the cross-section with topographical map And incidentally, the site plan indicates a setback of 5 feet, not 3 feet. And I think this is a discrepancy which should be noted. This is a surveyor's plan where he has indicated 5 feet setback. In September 2014 onwards, the foundation was set in place, which passed the Ventura County inspection. Then once again, on the 7th of October 2014, Building and Safety sent the same inspector to inspect the finished slab, who signed off accordingly, that is, demonstrating acceptance and approval of the work in progress on the yellow card, which you can see on the screen. And please note, at the far top, in the little box, you'll see zoning setback has been ticked, approved. In November, 26th of November 2014, the building was completed, except for the skylights and the main door, when the same Ventura County inspector came by to issue a stop work order. This meant that the construction materials outside, including the metal girders intended for the interior catwalks, were left to rust, as you can see here. Since then, we've been in correspondence with Ventura County, which on more than one occasion has admitted to its own error. Next one, please. As in this letter of the 3rd of December, where I have highlighted the word error in red. Well, let us turn to the 4 main clauses which govern requests for variances, starting with Clause A, which regards special circumstances and characteristics. Our property is located on Caesar Road. It is 0.66 acre in size. It is still zoned RE2, a zoning which normally has a 2 acre minimum lot size. As we read in the staff report, quote, the subject property consists of a legal lot that was created as a remainder of a parent parcel created on October the 25th, 1947, and recorded on February 25th, 1952, in Book 1050, page 196, and so on and so forth. Therefore, the proposed use and development of the subject property may be permitted, end quote. Consequently, given the unusually limited size of the property for Caesar Road, the selected site, in our opinion, is the only space which can cater to the single purpose of the building, that is, a repository of books without domiciliary function. The structure in the selected position is mostly hidden by trees, is far from the sewage system, and, as you can see, does not block natural views. In other words, the unit occupies the most viable position on the said property. Let's move to Clause B, regarding no special privileges. As an exclusive container of academic research books, our structure would hardly constitute a precedent or special privilege for the vicinity and zone. After all, the building was planned and constructed to house a unique library of over 20,000 books, periodicals, and archives, accumulated during my half-century of teaching the history of Russian culture. In the next slide, you'll see a virtual mock-up of the books in place. The height was calculated to provide maximum capacity, air circulation and atmospheric control, while the intended skylights with directed light were designed specifically to provide maximum natural lighting. Needless to say, there are several other analogous metal structures in the area, even on Caesar Road. Next. That's okay. Such as this one, for example, which was an accessory structure, which was then converted into living quarters. Next. But what is especially important to our case is that there is a 20-foot tall building, workshop building, located close by, which was constructed 5 years ago and is set back only 5 feet from the adjacent property. You see it on the screen. When the neighbors there complained about the height of the building during construction and its proximity to their property, they were told by county staff that the building permit and zoning clearance had been issued and that there was no recourse for revisiting the project approval. This building is also on a parcel named zoned RE2 on a lot which is 1 acre in size, and I can give you the parcel number if you need that. In this situation, the property owner was not required to seek a variance, a stop work order was not issued, and completion of the project was not delayed in any way. So we wonder, why should we be prohibited from following the same procedure? Let us go to clause C, regarding practical difficulties and unnecessary hardships. From the very beginning, the building was conceived as the eventual repository of our collection of academic research books, and designed therefore with this express purpose in mind: metal for protection from fire and pests, height for optimal capacity for said collection, no water, no gas, no living quarters, as the planning division itself has recognized. Implementing the project with its allied costs, including more than $10,000 spent in applying for this variance, has taken a serious toll on our life savings. And to adjust the height to 15 feet, given the actual setback, one of two suggestions by the planning division, would incur at least another $40,000, cutting down to size, as indicated in this professional letter by the erector. As you can read, next, the operation, according to him, would also be extremely complex and dangerous and would cause pollution from very wasted materials. In other words, this would be far more detrimental to the neighborhood than letting the structure stand where it is. As for the other proposal from the county, transferring it to another, so to speak, in quotes, legitimate part of the property, this would entail demolition and then reconstruction of the building, leaving a redundant slab. Next one, please. You can see what a very strong slab it was, which of course was passed by the inspectors. And this would cost at least another $100,000. We have a note from our professional erector who indicates this. And surely you would agree that a financial impact of this magnitude could be construed as a practical difficulty and unnecessary hardship. In any case, next, the result would look something like this. Note the red circles. On the left is the actual structure, and on the right, the virtual reconstruction of what the county is proposing. We doubt whether anyone moving along Caesar Road would want to see the building out in the center or towards the end of the property, blocking all views to the fields and mountains in the west. Our neighbors surely would object. In other words, to relocate the building on the same property, demolition of the metal structure, construction of a new foundation, and the re-erection of the building would constitute an enormous hardship. Alternatively, to lower the height to 15 feet would be extremely complicated, inasmuch as the structure was customized by the Empire Steel Plant in San Diego, and much material would have to be jettisoned, a detrimental procedure which would compromise the very purpose of the project, losing half of the required library space and cost, of course, an inordinate sum of money. However, we are ready and willing to make adjustments and to propose practical solutions which we hope will appeal to all concerned. If need be, as some neighbors have suggested, the visible parts of the building can be camouflaged, for example, by planting, or by trompe-l'oeil effect, which would turn the structure into a public work of art, or by adding details such as windows to the unrelieved surface, or by applying a new technique known as invisible architecture, a contemporary method of rendering the building part of surrounding nature, often using mirror technology. And of course, we could always repaint in as many colors as you like. Obviously, these proposals would be discussed at a neighborhood meeting where a consensus would be reached before this or that resolution would be adopted. So let us turn to the final point, the final clause D, which is about the failure to grant the variance will be detrimental and so on. Granting the variance would not have a detrimental effect on the use, enjoyment, or valuation of neighboring properties, as demonstrated by the written responses from our neighbors on Caesar Road, namely a petition signed by 40 neighbors, as you can see here on the screen, and 29 letters in favor of the structure. On the street, on the street map here, you can see our house in blue, and the elements circled in yellow indicate where the letters came from our neighbors. All these items have been forwarded to the clerk of the planning division. Incidentally, as far as we know, no formal complaint from any neighbor has been lodged with the county. And the last image. Today, on the 30th of July 2015, we have invited neighbors from Caesar Road to appear at this public hearing for the variance, some of whom would like to speak to the issue in hand. We feel that the positive response of our neighbors in the form of the petition, letters, and personal appearance here is ample testimony to our good faith and to the fact that the structure will not be detrimental to our neighbors' health, safety, welfare, or valuation. So to sum up, 1, there's an error on both sides, but we feel that the onus is on the county. 2, there is at least one important precedent in the vicinity. 3, our community seems to be behind us. And 4, it would spell a desperate hardship in the sense of finances. Before the floor is open to other commentators, Nicoletta Miesler, my wife and co-owner of the property in question, would like to add just a few words. Thank you.
Спасибо. Очень хорошо.
Пожалуйста. Спасибо вам.
Please say your name, Nicolette.
I will just...
Your name.
My name is Nicoletta Miesler.
Thank you.
I will just add a few words to what John has presented on our behalf. Recently, I became an American citizen. And I can't help initiating my remarks with the opening of the Declaration of Independence. We, the people. I have often thought of those words during the stressful and desperate months of this entire affair. What in fact I want to stress here is not, for example, document ZC112 or whatever, 1182, but the human factor, the compassion, the common sense and sensibility, which surely ought to be heard this morning. We the people here means, for me at least, our wonderful neighbors on Caesar Road, who from the very beginning have supported us unflinchingly. The 40 signature on a petition to Ventura County, practically all the road, reinforced by an affirmation from our immediate neighbors, south, north, east, and west, are witness to this. Here is a community whose opinion should be valued. Moreover, a further 25 letters of support confirm this unity. The actual letter are now with Ventura County. Caesar Road is a very special community, rural but in the midst of cultural foundations, rustic yet represented by individuals who come from all over the world, including myself. England, Italy, South Africa, Canada, Australia, France, Israel. And also by American heroes, veterans who fought in foreign wars. The people on Caesar Road arrive from very different backgrounds, making our neighborhood visually, culturally, and ethnically diverse, eclectic but permeated by a basic sense of tolerance. As neighbors have pointed out, tolerance is indeed eminently characteristic of our community. That is the reason why, even if they cannot be with us today, obviously, most of them on Thursday morning are working, they wrote a 25 letter in our defense. Some may like the building more than others, and incidentally, some do like it very much. But nobody has ever asked us to remove, to cut, or to destroy it. They know that we are very open to visual changes once the building has been completed, and all agree that to change the building in the way suggested by the county would be much more detrimental to them and to everyone close by. Finally, Caesar Road is not a tract housing where units are planned by developer on the basis of section X, Y, Z. The rural haven has long allowed for and encouraged a strong degree of creativity, resulting in projects which may not always have met with official approval, but which in the end have always been accepted. Thank you for your attention.
Merci, madame. Any questions of the applicant? John,
Yes, I do.
John.
May I speak to?
Who are you recognizing?
Rich?
Good morning.
Good morning, Richard.
Questions on the process. Did you submit the original application, or was that submitted on your behalf by?
No, we are in charge of everything from the very beginning.
Okay. Did you act as a contractor here?
Yes, we did everything.
Okay. Did you have a professional architect prepare the drawings and submit for approval?
We had the surveyor who did the site plan, the cross-section, and so on and so forth. And, of course, we had the plans for the actual structure, which were done professionally by a firm in San Diego. So I guess we're saying yes.
And you submitted all the plans to the county for approval that you presented here today?
As we did, yes. Yes, I presented on the screen.
Where did you hire a contractor then to construct the site or the facility?
Oh, yes, the actual builder? Of
Yes.
course, yes, that's a contractor, an erector, yes,
Okay.
who came in and put it up.
Did the contractor have any interaction with the county officials here as relates to the plans?
As far as I know, no, I don't know about that. He
So
probably
you
wasn't.
handled it all?
Yes.
Okay,
Sure he
thank
did.
you. That's
Okay.
all.
Commissioner Dukas?
You showed good morning. You
morning.
showed a picture of a storage shed that neighbors objected to. Where was that?
It's on a parallel street to the, where are we? South, I think it is, of Caesar Road. It's a road which is called Tree Ranch Road.
Tree Ranch Road.
Yes.
And how far away is that from your community?
I suppose in all it must be just maybe 3/4 of a mile.
Okay.
It's
So-
a parallel. It's a street which it's not the next parallel street, but the one after.
I didn't drive that one, so
Oh,
I
okay.
missed it.
Well, next time.
But and you said that the neighbors complained about that one.
They did.
And it has a 5-foot setback, and you're saying that your surveyor says that you actually have a 5-foot, not a 3-foot setback.
Exactly. Yes.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions of John? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, we'll open up the public hearing I will ask the speakers in the order that I received them, except for one. And since you marked you oppose the action, which is the recommended action, I'm assuming, we all know what happens when I assume, is that you support the applicant. So I'll read your names, I'll have you come up, give your name, and then I'll tell who the next person's going to be, all right? First one is Dennis Kopas, followed by, it looks like Michael German. So Dennis, come up and give us your name and let us know what you think.
Good morning. My name is Dennis Kopas, and I reside at 12453 Cesar Road, just 2 houses north of John and Nicolette. And I'm totally in favor of granting the variance. It's not an eyesore, and they're wonderful people. And I feel what they're doing would be a total literary asset to the community. Thank you.
Dennis, before you go, see if there's any questions. One question. Obviously, blue is an unusual color for an area that's brown and green. If you were to meet with John and Nicolette, would you ask for a different color or styling?
To me, the color is fine. Some of the displays up on the screen would work just great, too.
Okay, thank you. Michael, followed by Tom Forgay, F-O-R-G-E-A.
Good morning. My name is Michael Gorman. I live at 12307 Cesar Road, which is about 4 properties south of the applicant's property. I'd just like to address really 3 points. One is aesthetics, the other is fairness, and the last is lessons learned, planning department. The first is I completely support the project, the building. I have no issues with it. We submitted a letter. My wife also agrees that it is not an eyesore. It blends well with the background and the trees and in the community, and I think the key word here is eclectic. There is a wide variety of architectural styles, and that's what makes this community so attractive, in my opinion. The next is fairness. It's great that there are rules and that you identify when we are outside of those rules in order to maintain a certain style for the community. That's a very important process that we follow. What I find that is completely unfair here is the fact that it was after money was spent, it was after the building was in process, that suddenly we find out, my gosh, we have an issue with height restrictions and setbacks. So my last point here is, what do we learn from this lesson? In my opinion, variances are important for that reason, that not everything fits the mold. As long as the community supports that particular structure or that change, that's great. Do we want every structure to be this tall along the front of the properties? Absolutely not. Where I think the lessons learned is in the planning department. We have what appears to be a 2-dimensional application here, where we look at site plans. As part of that planning process, I really urge the board to consider investigating whether or not that is sufficient in order to proceed. It's not that difficult to have not an engineering drawing, but a basic drawing that also, in addition to your site plan that determines setbacks, but also a drawing that identifies the height of the structure. Okay? There's a misstep, I believe, in this process, and I don't believe that John and Nicoletta should be harmed by this misstep. There's been a financial undertaking to get this project done. So just to close, I absolutely agree with the aesthetics. I don't believe it has any impact on our neighborhood. In fact, I do, like the structure, to be honest with you. And so I also urge the board to consider reviewing the processes. Let's learn from this lesson. Let's not spend a lot of money and then find issues. Thank you.
Hold on, Mike. Any questions? I'll ask you the same question. The issue of the coloring or appearance, if you were to have that discussion with the applicants, any input?
I'm fine with blue.
Fine with blue.
It's perfectly fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom? Followed by William Monteleone. Name, please.
Good morning. My name is Tom Forget, Forgea. I live at 12396 Cesar Road, which is directly across the street from John and Nicoletta. I can't say anything different than what people have said already, and I'd like to echo everything said that supports John and Nicoletta's cause. In 1969, I was a county employee and stayed with the county for over 30 years. In 69, I also became a member of the Upper Ojai community in Cesar Road. It is eclectic. I can't see any issues that we have not either supported our neighbors or been vocal to tell our neighbors we didn't care what they're doing. Our main concern up there is water. This project does not impact our water system any. It's fire, setbacks, fire hydrant is there. It's having a quiet community, which, a library kind of seems like a quiet place. I really feel for John and Nicoletta. Errors they have made in probably not getting a general contractor is what I think some of the things here, and taking this arduous trip through the maze of building and safety and planning, which personally I would never do. I'd find it too confusing. But they relied on the county, and they relied on being told what they could do and what they couldn't do. Errors were made on the county's part. Where we stand right now is having a structure that cost a lot of money to build. It was built sound. I think it should be allowed to stay there. And I hope you ask me the question, do I like blue? Blue's one of my favorite colors.
Be careful on the shade.
I will. Blue is a great color. I personally would not have a blue building next to a white building, but that's picky. That's me. I'm not opposed to the building. I think it's a great thing. They're great neighbors who live in a great community. Thank you.
Okay, so you wouldn't want periwinkle or Wedgwood blue?
Periwinkle, no. Green, brown, that somebody mentioned, that's kind of nice.
I'm a guy. I don't know the difference between those two colors, I'm telling you right now. All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you. William Monteleone, followed by Fiona Whitmore.
Mr. Westner, I'm from Pasadena. I'm not a community member. I'd rather defer to the community members first, and you can save me for last if that's possible, because I come from Pasadena. I think it's more important for the neighbors to speak.
Long way from Texas.
Well, I'll tell you how I got here.
All right, then fine. We'll put you at the end. All right. Fiona Whitmore, followed by Robert Whitmore.
My name is Fiona Whitmore, and we live directly next door to Nicoletta and John on the north side. I want to thank you all for being here today to listen to us and give us your time. John and Nicoletta are not only great neighbors and community members, but also have been educators and authorities in art and culture for over 50 years. They have curated exhibitions around the world, written textbooks, art books, and books that have saved precious forms of art and movement around the world. John has been collecting very rare and significant books for all of these 50 years, and they intend to bring this collection up here to this building, to our community, so that they can finally catalog and organize them and use them to write more books on art and culture in their retirement. John was going to retire next year, But if this variance is not accepted, he'll have to postpone that indefinitely, and that I would say is an extreme hardship. It will create an extreme hardship, in fact, for both of them. And these are people who have given their lives to education and art. And think of all the things that we'll all be missing out because they won't be writing and sharing as well from this incredible body of work that they have saved. I know that you have the power and wisdom to grant this variance, and I am convinced that you will. Thank you.
Any questions, Ms. Whitmore?
Oh, no, and blue's great.
The blue's fine.
Yeah.
All right. Man, I was gunning for beige, but all right. Robert? Followed by Brian Thompson.
Members of the Planning Commission and citizens of Upper Ojai and the wonderful Cesar Road community, I first want to applaud the job of the Planning Commission staff in the rendering of their report. The staff report simplifies rather greatly the complex matters that were before us because 9 out of 11 of the issues they indicated were in compliance. That leaves us primarily issue 7, and that's what we've been discussing. It's at the bottom of page 8 on the report. And there, I think, again, the planning staff in this report gave us a very helpful guidance in that they say that the granting of variances is based upon discretionary decisions and allow deviations from ordinance regulations governing, and the specific words are used in that citation of the ordinances, governing the facts of setbacks and heights. That's really, when you get down to it, the only issues we have here, all the others were passed, is the issue of the height and the setback. So it simplifies things enormously. Now, when we get to the determination of whether a variance can be granted based upon a discretionary determination, we are faced with 4 standards. The 4th of which the commission staff agreed was, and I think one of the most important standards, was reached. As far as standard 1 is concerned, and there have been paraphrases of that, but I would really suggest that we all look carefully at the wording of that standard, which has to do with special circumstances or exceptional characteristics applicable to the subject property with regard to size, yes, shape, yes, and there is primarily what the staff commented on, with size and shape, and there may not be a great deal of variance, although it's all over the place on Cesar Road, but also topography, location, or surroundings which do not apply generally to comparable properties, okay, that do not apply generally to comparable properties. Well, when you drive up or down Cesar Road, the only place that you can get a glimpse of a territorial view to the beautiful mountains toward regular Ojai, I think it's to the west, is from the view that's available there on their property. Not only that, in terms of surroundings, shape, just these things that distinguish this property, that give, I believe, the commissioners the ability to see that this standard is met. There is the only known sort of grove, if you will, of very large pine trees. There's about 8 of them. There's no other place on Cesar Road, or in Upper Ojai for that matter, that has those kinds of trees. Had the building been placed otherwise, what you see through this vision is a grove of trees and then this wonderful view. The other distinguishing characteristic has to do with, I believe, zoning circumstances of the past. This And I know because our next door property to the north is the same thing. It originally was expected to be developed into 2 properties. It was large enough for what would have been 2 lots. Many of the properties on Cesar Road are that size. So all of the development, as you notice in the pictures, was to the south side, which is one of the reasons why it made so much sense to put the building behind it. But also, you notice that the house is not set back very many feet. It's a little less close than it looked like on the illustration that was provided. But nonetheless, our property is the same, only with the skewing to the north. So for the special characteristics of that property, and I think there are some, I believe that Standard 1 is reached. Standard 2 has to do with granting the variance that it won't confer special privileges inconsistent with the limitations upon other properties in the same vicinity. And here's the important distinction. This is all on the bottom of page 8, I believe, or it starts at the bottom of page 8. It has to do with consistency with land use designation. Well, certainly I could put a structure on my property, so it's not a special privilege from that standpoint. Land use, I believe, for this standard is more in keeping with zoning uses. In other words, we're not putting a repair shop there. We're not putting some kind of commercial establishment there. We're dealing here, I'm not sure that Standard 2 has a great deal to do with setbacks and size of the building. I think it has to do with consistency, with limitations on land use, and I don't believe that the other properties can't put that kind of structure on their property. Admittedly, they would need to do it according to, if they weren't going to have to seek a variance, according to the setback rules and regulations. Now, here's the most interesting one. Standard 3, okay? That has to do, and I ask again that we all look carefully at the wording here. It has to do solely with size requirements and building intensity standards as they apply to the subject property. I don't think there's any question here about the minimum parcel size. That doesn't come before us here today at all. And nor does the issue of building intensity. That hasn't been raised here. So my view is that Standard 3 is met and that it's not relevant. And Standard 4, the staff itself has properly agreed that this is consistent with. So when it comes to the issue of the commissioner's ability to grant this based upon discretionary determination, my belief is that the statutes and the ordinances allow that to happen, and in this case, because of all the standards being met on the one area that you're supposed to get over before even that discretion can be utilized, have been met, and that the board, if it so determines in its discretion, is certainly within its power to grant this without in any way violating the ordinances or the plans. And I thank you very much for the work you've done to preserve the beauty and integrity of our beautiful Ojai. Thank you.
Any questions, Robert? Okay, color question. Any choice other than blue?
Well, I will admit that I wasn't in that pleased with that choice. I actually have come to begin to like it now that it's been there for a while, but I probably would support making it look a little bit more like the residential structure to blend in with that, or to use some of the camouflage techniques. But I'm sure the community will come to that. But if it were to remain blue, I'd be perfectly fine. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Brian? Followed by... One lady has asked, before you talk, Brian, Mr. Montagnoni, one lady has asked to go very last, so you'll go right after Brian, all right? Brian, your name,
well,
please?
Good morning. My name is Brian Thompson. I live on 12544 Cesar, which is approximately 4 properties up, from the applicant here. And I would like just to insist or to basically talk about 2 matters here. First of all, the first matter is that I do approve of the building as it is proposed. I will support, definitely the variance if it is possible for the Commission here. So this is kind of out of the way. Now, before you ask about the Carter situation, I certainly could. I don't really mind. I don't mind too much. Green maybe would be a better idea, but I think that as it's been related, the Cesar Road community is frankly quite close, and we can certainly determine this, to the better liking, of the community. My second and frankly important reason for me, and I would say personally, is to be here, is to tell the Commission here that I'm very worried about what is happening here. Because if we consider the various people of Cesar Road, probably I can say, and I think some people will agree with me, that John and Nicoletta are probably the people who are the ones who are most subject to follow the rules. Follow the rules. Follow the rules. These are people who from the very start had no idea than to follow the rules, do what was necessary to get granted a permit to do that structure that is extremely important for them, for their life, on this particular property. They followed the rules, and they spent a lot of money, and up to this point, here we are here today in this particular lockdown situation. Okay, so I'm thinking here, well, this is insane to a certain degree, because basically here I am with my acre up street. What if I want to go through the same process here? Who am I going to trust here if I cannot trust this commission? How am I going to trust, the county to allow me to do what I want to do on my property? How am I going to possibly raise the funds to go through all that process and find myself faced with a situation where I have eventually to take everything down with absolutely no compensation? And I should ask myself, where is the accountability? So I'm not going to open this debate because I'm not, here for this. But I'm wondering all these questions. And frankly, for me, it's a very scary and very worrisome and troublesome moment. So this is what I just wanted to say. And I would like you again to consider the variance for this particular project. I don't think that John and Nicoletta should be actually responsible financially and should be set back like they are. Definitely, by what's going on here, which is a total surprise for them and for us as well. Thank you very much.
Any questions of Brian? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, William? Yeah, the last one will be Alasdair Coyne, C-O-Y-N-E, I believe it is.
Good morning. My name is
please?
William Monteleone. I reside in Pasadena, California, and I'm a frequent visitor to Ojai Valley and to the small community on Cesar Road, where neighbors wave and smile, even if they're not sure who you are. I am speaking on behalf of the Bolts and the people who smile and wave. I've known the Bolts for many years as educators and have had the honor of being a guest in their home, experiencing the peace and quiet of the community that is sometimes lacking on my street in Pasadena. I've spent the past year watching the events and dilemma unfold concerning the book repository. I've had the opportunity in the last 8 weeks speaking, listening, watching neighbors come and go at the Bolts house, and having visited neighbors' houses as well, discussing what is to become of what I now call the cathedral. If the variance is granted, a stressful time is over. If it is not, I see two outcomes that I have arrived at as being as an outsider looking in. Outcome one, the Bolts are denied variance, causing them to bear complete financial responsibility in removing the structure, although John and Nicoletta thought they followed all procedures laid out by Ventura Safety and Planning with approval of structure design. But they bear all costs associated with denial, plus the psychological duress of what has occurred. Outcome two, the neighbors. The neighbors who are supportive of the Bolts and understand what has happened will be subjected to weeks of demolition project that may involve heavy equipment, machinery, a crane, a cacophony of sound including cutting, sawing, large iron girders welded together piece by piece. As it is taken down, there will be dust, debris, materials leaving the property, making its way down Cesar Road. Leaving the structure, I believe, will be unique to the area, not just because of its size and color, but it will hold over 20,000 volumes of rare books collected by the Bolts. Books will be rarities as the digital revolution continues. The Cathedral of Cesar Road, with its books, will be in my mind like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, built for the ages, somewhat flawed, but a sight to see and visit nonetheless in the community of Ojai on Cesar Road. Thank you.
Okay, any questions, William? Thank you for coming.
And I like invisible architecture.
I got a question about the mirror reflecting heat, but we'll get to that. We had that problem downtown LA with the Disney Hall. Okay, Alice, and I apologize for not saying your name, and that will be the last speaker card I have in support of the applicant. Your name, please, when you get there.
My name's Alistair Coyne. I also live on Cesar Road, a few houses north of John and Nicoletta. And I thank the Chair and members of the Planning Commission for holding this hearing today and making a decision on this important topic. I'm a friend and neighbour of John and Bolt and Nicoletta Meislers. I'd like to provide you with a brief synopsis of their work as experts in the history of early 20th century Russian art. They are among a handful of American academic leaders in this field. They spend their lives between here and Russia, where they research in that nation's outstandingly maintained library archives. They have written dozens of books and hundreds of research papers. And I've got one of their books here, so you can just see, how serious these are in terms of works of art. This is Masterpieces of Russian Stage Design, 1880 to 1930. These are very beautiful, well-illustrated books. These high-quality art books, just to give you some context. John teaches at USC and has curated art exhibits at the Metropolitan Museum in New York, at LACMA in LA, and recently in Florence, Italy, among dozens of shows worldwide. None of their work in this specialized field has made them these unassuming cultural icons wealthy, I must note. John and Nicoletta are regularly asked to authenticate works of Russian art from the period they specialize in. Even though there are Russian nationals with expertise in this area, collectors in Russia seek John and Nicoletta's professional opinions about their collections because of John and Nicoletta's global stature in this area. As part of his dedication to this field, he's built up a library of some 20,000 books, manuscripts, and posters. Nicoletta has her own library in Italy of slightly smaller in size. That is what this building is designed to hold when John retires. Currently, the books are maintained at USC's expense in Los Angeles, but when John retires, he has to move them elsewhere, so he's hoping that this library will be ready when he retires. Eventually, this library may be left to Cambridge University in England, which has expressed an interest in inheriting it. As to the variance being sought today, the applicants clearly made an error in not noticing the setback requirements. Owner-builders, they screwed up. No doubt about that. County planners also made multiple errors, and they are the professionals in this field. Shouldn't be screwing up. The county approved the library plans on 5/21/14 with a site plan showing a 32-foot tall building. Approved, stamp on it. And the building inspector signed off on the property line setback on the yellow card on site on October the 7th. See the little yellow card there? It had setback at the top. When you're stamping the card, the inspector comes out to the site plans are there, he looks at the plans, he gets the yellow card, he stamps it. It would have been nice if he had noticed it then. The options put forward by county staff are not feasible for the applicants. To move the building and pour a new foundation would cost over $100,000. To shorten the building to 15 feet would cost less, some $40,000, but the building would then be insufficient to hold the library it's constructed for. The applicants have already seen their library building delayed by over 8 months. They spent $10,000 to request this variance. They've lost the 4 months they usually spend in Moscow each spring conducting research. And their building has suffered rain damage. And John's retirement is being postponed, delaying his engaging in the research and writing project he has lined up for his retirement. There's a cultural cost to this library building's delay. Nobody else will ever write the works on Russian art that John and Nicoletta are currently distracted from. All we are asking, with the support of dozens of neighbours, is that the planning commissioners grant this variance that really only authorizes the library to be 15 feet away from where it should have been. That is not too much to ask. Thank you very much.
Any questions? I have the one.
I'm happy with whatever consensus that neighbors arrived at. You know, blue, it's dark blue, like more sky blue would blend in better with the sky, but John and Nicoletta propose, if all goes well, you know, getting neighbors together, and I would be part of that group and would be part of reaching a consensus on how to make it less visible.
Spoken like a true diplomat. Okay. Thank you very much. Those are the speaker cards that I have. As I said earlier, this is when we normally take a small break. So if you are parked in Lot G, please go move your car. If you're not, we'll take a 10-minute break. We'll be back at 20 of the hour. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We are back on the record. We appreciate your patience with us. As I have said, we have finished our speaker cards. Do I have anybody in opposition? Nobody has presented a card. Nobody's said anything. So I have given them the appropriate opportunity to oppose the applicant's request for variance. With that, the applicant, if there's anything further you would like to say, or would you like to stand on the record now that your neighbors have told you what colors they like? John?
We like blue as well.
Oh, right. But based on your accent, I thought you'd like Wedgwood blue of all the blues.
I'm American.
All right. The applicant has waived any additional time. However, I will reserve, based on staff comments and questions, if they would like to say anything. At this time, staff, any additional comments on what you've heard today?
Yeah, we each have something to contribute. I just wanted to start off by, I cannot emphasize this enough, that we feel absolutely horrible about the mistake that our colleague made, which resulted in this situation. I mean, nobody has enjoyed dealing with this. Most of you know this is Mr. Souter's first Planning Commission hearing. What a great first item to bring to your commission. I mean, I cannot commend him enough. He's handled this professionally. I think the Bolts appreciate how he's handled it. And if there was a way we could have recommended approval of this variance to your commission based upon the legal requirements that apply to variances, we would have. Unfortunately, we just don't believe that they have been able to make the findings, or you can make the approval standards. You may disagree with our recommendation, and I completely respect that. But once again, we need to focus on the legal requirements for granting a variance. And as Mr. Souter explained very well in his presentation and in the staff report, yes, we did feel that we could make one of those findings. However, you must make all of the findings for approval of a variance. So please keep that in mind when you're deliberating on this item. And I think Mr. Bolt's quote, "There ought to be room for consideration of the variance." Yes, I agree. Unfortunately, once again, the legal requirements, we don't feel they can be met to make the findings for approval. There was also direction to us, rightfully so, about improving our procedures for communication between the Planning Division and the Building and Safety Division. Yes, we've actually already implemented those, and we've already started process improvement efforts to improve the communication, especially in these situations where somebody is going to rely upon that standard plate that Building and Safety has for those accessory structures. Nowadays, what we require is you actually staple that form to the zoning clearance, so it is explicitly clear that you must stay within the confines of what's stated in that building and safety form if you are going to proceed with the zoning clearance without formal building elevations to us. Because for most types of zoning clearances that we issue, yes, you must submit building elevations, floor plans, and a site plan which reflects what you're proposing to do. This case was one of those situations where no good deed goes unpunished. The Bolt showed up at the planning counter without the building elevations and floor plans. The planning counter staff said, okay, you've only submitted the site plan. However, if you stay within the confines, once again, of what building and safety allows pursuant to that standard plate, you go no higher than 15 feet, stay at least 3 feet back, I can issue the zoning clearance. I just went up during the Planning Commission hearing. I just double-checked with the planning counter staff who issued that zoning clearance. He said, yes, he did make it explicitly clear, not only in the zoning clearance, as you saw, but also verbally stated, once again, 15 feet, no higher, and you can be within 3 feet of the setbacks. So I don't know what happened, what got lost there. Regardless, that's no excuse for our mistake and not sending the plans that were submitted to Building and Safety, which differed from what was authorized in the zoning clearance, back to planning for our review. Once again, we've already started implementing process improvement efforts with Mr. McDonald's group to improve that communication and ensure that doesn't occur. So nowadays, those plans are coming back to us before Building and Safety gives it that stamp of approval and sends applicants on their way to go ahead and build. With that said, I know Mr. Souder and Mr. Wright both have items to contribute in response to some of the testimony you heard today.
And thank you for letting me respond. One thing I wanted to hit on, and I brought the PowerPoint back up onto the screen here so that we can go over some of the history. The background on this situation is a little bit different than Mr. Bull's account of the timing of events. A estimate to build this 900 square foot building commenced in late 2013, in December 2013. On, I believe it was the 18th of December. The zoning clearance that was issued on the 19th. But that plan, and that reflects in the zoning clearance, in the project description, that the standard plate would be used, and in the table that's required for inputting into issue the zoning clearance. And that issuance occurred immediately after the project was initially submitted for an estimate. Well, that estimate was withdrawn. That permit actually did not move forward in the review process with Building and Safety. The Bolts resubmitted their plans to Building and Safety in 2014 in February. So it was 2 months after the submittal and granting of the zoning clearance that the plans were resubmitted to Building and Safety. And I can't say what the Bolts had in 2013. That's not in the record because it was just an estimate. It was just to begin the building permit process. But I just wanted to clarify that the building permit that was issued was not a day before the zoning clearance. The zoning clearance was issued in 2014. The building permit was submitted in February 13, and then the building permit was submitted in 2014. So that's just something I wanted to clarify, and it was a description that the standard plate was described not only in a hidden number in the back, but also in the project description and how it was approved. So I just wanted to clarify the timing of the history and the timing of events. Additionally, I'd like to address the building that came up in the presentations on Tree Lane, I believe it is. And I'm making some assumptions because I haven't been able to see the APN and confirm some of the history, but I'm familiar with a scenario that played out in that area when I started here. And the situation was the neighbor did complain of a tall building that blocked their view. And so we investigated that. Building and Safety put a hold on things. And we went back and looked at it, and Mr. McDonald required that we did a setback certification. There was a survey done. And out in the field, and it was confirmed that that building is not 5 feet away, and I know the property next door feels as though his fence line is his property line and was not happy with the determination, but that building is actually approximately 19.6 inches away, so yes, give or take 6 inches.
19 feet, 6 inches.
19 feet, 6 inches, not the 5 that was represented. I apologize. And so I'm going by some memory here. And then the height of that building was the 25 feet. And there was a 6-inch discrepancy also in the height. So I want to make the record perfectly clear that the planning counter issues a zoning clearance for a 25-foot building. It turned out to be a little bit taller. I can't give you the exact numbers. And the setback certification showed that it wasn't exactly 20, but they already had built that permit in accordance with an approved zoning clearance and building permit. In this case, the zoning clearance differs than the building permit. So the Tree Lane is a little bit different circumstances, and I just wanted to clarify that for the record.
Anything else from staff?
I think at the moment that's all we need to, unless there's any further questions.
Dan?
I just believe, Commissioner Idikis, you might have some questions about the structural components. I just want to let you, Mr. McDonald and Mr. Smith are here, and they're the staff who are best able to respond to those questions.
Well, one of the questions that I had was, there are sheds, and then there's this shed, because this shed is, to my eyes looked beefier than maybe something else. So, were there soils analyses? Were there inspections of that footing? It looked like a very substantial footing. Is it fire rated, considering that high fire danger that it occupies? I just wondered if you could elaborate on that, on those points.
Mr. McDonald, your name for the record, sir, so folks know.
My name is Jim McDonald. I'm county building official. Commissioners, in response to your question, Commissioner Dukas, the building is a residential accessory structure, and being below 1,000 square feet on a level lot, we were able to waive the requirements for a soil report, but in trade for that waiving of a requirement for soil report, which is a standard process, they have to design the footing for the maximum potential expansion index of the soil on site. So I believe the footing is at least 27 inches deep and 15 inches wide, so it's a very heavy footing. And in terms of the high fire requirements, the building, upon completion, would comply with those high fire hazard requirements. But of course, right now the project is stopped in its current configuration, and so they've not proceeded to protect the building for any high fire requirements.
Okay, and that was inspected and approved in the field?
Well, the foundation was, yes. The foundation was. The dates and the timelines and stuff are really not disputed.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions, Ms. McDonald? Rick?
You mentioned that foundation was approved. Building and Safety approved the foundation.
We did. We approved the foundation first location.
Was that a design? Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Was that a design approval or a site approval?
That was both. There was a design approval in terms of the design of the building, the structural review of the building, and then also a site inspection. I don't have the exact date that we did the inspection, but it was on Mr. Bolt's yellow job card that he had up on the screen earlier. And so we did perform the field inspection of the foundation and the slab work, yes.
I'm troubled. I don't understand how Building and Safety could sign off on the foundation, given the setback requirements, which I'm sure you and your staff are familiar with, and I assume you're a management type person in Building and Safety. How does that happen?
Well, in this case here, as it was indicated in the record going forward, the project was submitted to the planning department indicating one set of plans, and when it came into Building and Safety, it was a different set of plans. And the plans that came into Building and Safety they had an inadequate site plan, didn't have adequate elevations. So in the rush of our activities at the time, back in 2014, early 2014, things were quite busy, and so we overlooked the requirement to confirm that what was approved by the zoning department was also part of what was being reviewed and approved by Building and Safety. So in terms of structural review, we did approve the design of a 30-foot high building. In terms of the administrative review, we did not confirm that that's what planning had also approved, and that was an oversight on our part.
I hear what you're saying, but personally, I find a problem with the procedure. And I hear what staff is saying is with regards to corrective issues, processes are now in place to make sure that never happens again. But
I can cover that. I can discuss two items one item that we have completed and have implemented to ensure that this doesn't happen. Because I understand that if something like this happens, it's a significant impact on a property owner. We don't have any interest at all in taking our duties lightly for the review of the projects to make sure that what planning is approved is what we approve. And a significant majority of our projects go through that comply with planning, they go through Building and Safety, they comply with the structural requirements, and there's never an issue because they match. But being an organization with people, errors get made, errors are made. So what have we done? The first thing that we did is we changed the process for the counter staff and our plan check engineering staff to both confirm upon application that what is being given to us is what planning has approved, and then during the plan review process, the plan check engineers confirm what planning has approved and that the applicant didn't change the project during the review, and then prior to permit issuance, there's a third review that confirms the same thing. What planning has approved is what we've approved in terms of height and setback requirements. The second thing is the eventual implementation of electronic document review in building and safety, and planning will be a part of that, as will fire department and public works. And what will happen is the goal is to have a single site submission of plans where plans come in and then planning, Public Works, Fire Department, grading, all review and see the identical same set of plans that we're reviewing. And that was also something that when that's implemented, that will help eliminate these errors. And these errors are few and far between, but they do happen.
That review would occur by all staff departments at the same time?
Say that again?
That review of those projects or plans would occur at the same time by staff from the various departments, or sequentially?
In the EDR, as I referenced?
Yeah.
Yes, that would occur for the required agencies that would have an element to review. Grading doesn't necessarily have to review all projects. If the project is something that they would review, then yeah, they would be part of that.
Are you saying this procedure is not in place? Because I was led to believe that some years ago the county moved to get that as part of the process because of the various complaints from applicants in regards to going through planning and building and safety. And that had, in fact, been put into place. I hear you saying now that's not the case?
Well, I think I'll assume for a moment you're talking about a cell automation. Cell automation is in place. We do have all the same database records that we're able to look at, but what we're talking about here is actual plans that are submitted and reviewed electronically as opposed to the paper copies that we received in this case, for example.
So all submittals have to be done electronically?
Not initially. They will eventually want plans to come in electronically, and there's a significant portion of the design community that does their documents electronically, and so for them the next natural step is just to go into an electronic submittal and review. But there are still designers and builders out there that don't do things electronically, and so over time we'll be working with them on ways to get the plans into our system electronically. But initially, when we first start doing it, we're not going to be able to just require everybody on day one to submit all plans electronically.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr.
I have a question. Okay, so when the inspector went out or goes out to and looks at the slab, say, and he has the yellow card and a copy of the plans, maybe, or not?
I would assume under normal procedures, Mr. Bolt had obviously the job card there, the yellow card. He also had the plans that we had approved, and the plans that we approved showed the foundation design, including the elevation and so forth of the structure. The inspector went by that document and approved the foundation based on its location that was presented.
Okay. And would that have been a standard foundation? Would an inspector have said, wow, this is a big foundation, what are you building here? And maybe looked at it at that point and noticed that it was going to be 32 feet instead of 15 feet? Is that a reasonable question to have asked or expected him to have noticed at that point?
Had our plans been clearer in terms of the administrative review to confirm that the elevation and the zoning documents and our elevation and site plans matched planning, yeah, it would be absolutely appropriate for the inspector to expect that. The inspector looked at the plans that were approved. The plans showed a 5-foot or a 3-foot setback, and the inspector approved it based on that. And in the ideal world, the inspector would look at both the zoning approval and the permit and the plans and make sure that they all match perfectly. And in terms of this inspection, the inspector simply did a foundation inspection, and also a 27-inch footing is really not that large of a footing. There's much larger footings that go in buildings. We see often 27-inch deep footings, 15 inches wide for accessory structures, because many times the concrete is cheaper than the soil report. And the standards allow for that, especially for residential accessory structures.
Okay. And then I'd also like to make the comment that when you go to planning, you sometimes have owners who are, doing this on their own behalf, and you also have contractors coming. And then forms such as this building and safety form that was handed to them. If it was handed to me, it's not very clear. It's kind of confusing. It just seems that either, since it's not required that a contractor submit or request the permit, when you know you're dealing with an owner, then things could be maybe spelled out more clearly and be presented more clearly for that.
Anything else for Mr. McDonald? Tough day in the box, huh?
Okay.
Thank you, Jim. All right, anything else from staff? All right, anything else from the public? All right, then I will close the public hearing, and it's time for this body to deliberate. Ladies and gentlemen, yes?
I just wanted to direct a couple of cleanup questions to staff.
All right, rewind. I didn't close it yet.
Okay. Are the 4 findings that this commission must make, are those all of them, the ones on our staff report on pages 8 and 9 of 20? There are 4 findings. Those are the ones that they all must be made in order for us to grant the variance. Is that correct?
I just want to clarify, you're referring to the PowerPoint presentation or the staff report?
The staff report, just because I don't have to flip through pages. It's just the 4, it says land use policy 3.1.2-10.
No, actually, in the staff report, I'm looking at it right now, the findings are set forth starting on page 12, and it continues.
But those are the same ones.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just didn't know to what you're referring. Yeah, so 8 through 17, actually, they're stated in there, so.
I'm sorry, I need to follow what you're saying. Page 12?
Okay, so on page 12 of the staff report, there is the first finding, it's a standard of approval. We call it a finding for the variance. And then there is the applicant statement and then our rebuttal. And then the second finding is stated on page 14 of the staff report.
But
so on and so forth.
But the 4 that we need to make are on page 8 and 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, not any narrative, just the 4 general findings that the...
Yes, and yeah, those are more or less, there's a slight wording difference between those findings. That comes from the general plan policy, and it almost mirrors exactly the findings in the ordinance. But yes, you could rely upon those just for
and is it,
brevity's sake.
And if this commission should disagree with the staff recommendation regarding whether or not we could make those findings, we're not limited to following the staff's recommendations. Is that correct?
Absolutely not. You're not limited by the staff recommendations. However, you would have to state some findings and some evidence to support those 4 standards. There's been a lot of testimony today you can rely on for that. But I need to be, we would have to either take a recess or continue this hearing to another date so we could restate the findings and basically flip what's recommended in the staff report to make sure it complies with the law. But yes, of course, that's staff's recommendation. That's the point of the hearing. It's in your discretion to grant the variance or not grant the variance, with the caveat, as I just mentioned, that we have to make the findings and it has to be supported by the evidence in the record.
Okay. Regarding the plain meaning of the first finding that we must make, that staff recommendation says that that it is their opinion that cannot be made. But I'm looking at it and it says there are special circumstances or exceptional characteristics applicable to the subject. Are there special circumstances? Is that separate than the exceptional characteristics? Because I do think that there are special circumstances. I don't remember there being a mistake made by this. Perhaps you do. But that seems to me that there is a special circumstance. Is that something that could be found? Is that something that could be supported by council?
Well, to answer what I understood the beginning of your question to be, it's phrased as special circumstances or exceptional characteristics, so you could rely on one or the other. But then it would be your commission's job, if you will, to just state what facts you believe constitute those special circumstances. And then we could use those to craft the findings. In other words, for example, if you were to say that, the commission believes that there are special circumstances applicable to the subject property with regard to on and on that's stated here in the standard, and then you state here are the facts that we believe, then we could craft and say that's the evidence relied upon to make the finding that there are special circumstances. And you wouldn't have to find for both. You wouldn't have to find special circumstances and exceptional characteristics.
Well, this is coming to us after the fact. If they were coming before, if they were looking for a variance and they had not started construction, there was no footing dug, nothing was poured, no inspection, and they were coming forward with a variance and they were trying to make the argument that our property is so unique, which I think it is because it's small and because of the window of the view that you get from the road, and it's the entry of the community. So there is a clearing. It's very wooded, and there is this clearing that happens to be on their property that you do see this spectacular view of mountains. So I do think that that's arguable, but given the fact that we're, trying to clean this up after the fact, I think that there are special circumstances, and it appears that there's very, agreement. I don't think that you connived to not notice the 15 feet and that you went ahead and spent all this money, thinking that you'd get away with something. I don't believe that. So I think that the combination of things makes a special circumstance. I'm just offering that out, and I'm wondering if that's something that's supportable that this commission could do if it's so desired.
Commissioner Dukas, I believe you hit the issue in that it's the circumstances of the land and not the circumstances of the permitting. So the finding would have to be tailored to address the circumstances that exist on the property, and that was discussed with the Bolts, and I believe their response was tailored to address the circumstances of the property itself.
Okay, so given that, I do see that it is arguable because of the community being so wooded, and the fact that you cannot see this from the highway. You cannot see this from the street, one street, help me with directions, is that west? Yes. I drove it and was looking for it. So you cannot see it until you're right on top of it, and only at a certain angle. As I said, there's a clearing, and that's where you see the mountains. So there is, if this structure were moved, it would block the view of the mountains for the community as everybody drives in. So I thought it was arguable. Regarding a special privilege, when someone gets a variance, is there a precedent set where everybody else gets to say, well, we get to exceed our height limits in the side setback because they did, or do they also have to make this additional finding that their property is unique as well?
Yeah, every request stands on its own. It's not like a slippery slope sort of argument such that they got their variance, therefore I should get one too. It all stands on the facts of that particular property. just make sure you're reading the entirety of these findings, though, especially number 1, because I just want to read it verbatim. There are special circumstances or exceptional characteristics applicable to the subject property with regard to size, shape, topography, location, or surroundings, which do not apply generally to comparable properties in the same vicinity and land use designation. So you're comparing the physical characteristics of this property with physical characteristics of other similarly situated properties in the same zone and community. So if your commission is going to lean towards an approval, please give us the factual basis upon which you're making these findings, and we'll make sure to get that in there. Thank you.
Well, this community, it's like a little pocket with this private road, and this subject property is toward the beginning of this community. So yes, there are other properties that are closer to the road, say the entrance of this community, but this one is towards the entrance, and it is the only one that I noted that you could see these mountains through this clearing. That was just my firsthand observation. So I don't think that they apply to the other properties in the same vicinity, because the majority of the properties are back, behind or around. It kind of goes in a J shape. So I do think that this one, it could be argued that it's unique, that it's that this one in particular, its location in the community is more toward the entrance, and so it kind of sets the tone of what you can see around it, because it is there are a lot of trees. So does that, do the trees make a difference, or do you not look at the trees and you only look at the ground? That's a question.
Well, I believe that you're looking at the whole property in comparison, so I think it's a lot is within your discretion to make these findings. It's you've stated some sufficient facts. There's also been facts in the record stated by other speakers regarding the trees and as she pointed out, the location of the shed if it were moved, or the whatever it's called. So it applies to all, not just the ground, the whole property itself. But it is correct. We're talking about the property, not so much the circumstances of how we led to this situation.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. These are just musings of mine. I'm just thinking out loud.
Well, if I may, just to kind of help you out. If we say, because that's what staff and the county council, what I'm hearing, if we were to say, when the applicant presented that if they moved the shed to the position that they legally would be permitted, and we saw that it interfered with the location, surroundings, and the view, that creates a special circumstance that we can make a finding, though it's not appropriate, by putting it in the legal position. So leaving where it is gives them a special, because of the shape of their lot, because how small it is. To move it then would interfere with the surroundings, the view from the road, those kinds of things. Then Mr. Thompson represented that when you drive by, given the pine trees and the fact that the trees cannot be touched, etc., to require them to move the shed to the legal thing would then create an impact. In my mind, that would be sufficient facts to provide that we, in our judgment, felt that moving it to the legal position would not give them, that we can make that finding. So I hear what you're saying, and I'm trying to help you craft the fact. In my judgment, that's what we have up here. I think there's enough facts to support finding something different on number 1. Does that help you?
I'd be interested in hearing what the rest of the commission had to say.
Okay, if we're going to deliberate, then any questions for staff? Sorry, sir. All right, then I'm closing the public hearing, deliberation time. Again, let me reiterate. If we're going to go against the staff recommended actions, we must present, in our judgment, out of the record or the testimony we heard today, the facts that would support changing that. Okay? I understand the question I've heard about the situation between the two systems and the staff, and I think that goes to the issue of the applicants relied on certain professionals, both our side and their side, And I also agree that they acted in good faith, and they relied on certain things. I know, I look at this, and I've looked at a lot of these things, and I had to search to find where if I were really looking for it, and I was looking for it, you turn it sideways this way, and there's a little print that says 10 feet max. Okay. A non-professional would have a difficulty in identifying that. Okay, I'm going to get off my shtick, because I want to hear what the Director Stevens has to say about the general plan. Any other comments, discussions? Just anything you heard, what you want to do, how you feel, your thoughts. This is open time. You don't have to be cautious. Commissioner Onsot?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I find personally, in the interest of justice and fundamental fairness, and while it may be a close call, all the elements of a variance are present. I may have to stretch a little for that, but if I stretched, I'd stretch because I believe the counties have stopped for asserting they're not because of their activities. And that may be a separate basis for going forward and approving. I'm not sure how that works in with the county council's idea of what needs to go on here, but I think there's an estoppel argument which can be utilized by the applicant to stop the county from asserting those elements aren't present. I am quite prepared to approve the variance.
Okay, Commissioner Onsot, anybody else? Commissioner Rodriguez?
As the commission knows, I'm a retired executive manager within an agency here in the county, significantly, a fairly large agency. If this type of situation had happened in the environment I worked in, I can tell you with certainty that administratively we'd be conducting some sort of investigation as it relates to incompetence or neglect of duty on the part of staff. That's significant. But the reality is, as I hear everything that's going on, there are issues everywhere, but the right hand not knowing what the left hand is doing in RMA, planning and building and safety, created this situation that we're in now. And I accept the fact that remediation is now in place or about to be in place, but that doesn't take away from the fact that the issue was created by an error on the part of the county. And it's unfortunate that the applicant is not a professional, and it's unfortunate, significantly unfortunate that a professional didn't submit the plans to county who knows how to deal with the issues, because the regulations within municipalities in the county are different. Regardless of where a contractor or architect might work, you have to be familiar with those regulations to go forward, particularly when you're investing the type of money that you're anticipating to invest. I'm also tending to move forward on the side of fairness. Certainly if I had done that, and I live in the unincorporated part of Ventura County, and I've done reconstruction on a residence, and I've used a contractor. I've used an architect to do the plans, and I've used an architect or a contractor to submit the plans and got it through and paid the fees, because I didn't feel I had, although I had knowledge and awareness, I didn't have the expertise that was required to go through the maze. It's a difficult process if you're not familiar with it. And I'm familiar with issues of setbacks, because I had to amend my plans as well because the issue of setback that actually came about as a result of an inspection by county staff on site. And so I'm familiar with that. And I very much, I know what the rules are, and I'll abide by the rules. I may not agree with them, but I'll abide by them. I mean, that's professionally, that's my foundation. And it's just unfortunate that that the county, in their effort to expedite a process because of workload, created a situation where they neglected to make sure that the right hand knew what the left hand was doing. And maybe that's too simplistic, but that's a reality. And that's the reality that these people find themselves in now. They, as a lay applicant, he depended on the expertise of the county to review and provide whatever guidance or critique to the process that needed to be done to correct it and move forward within the rules of the that he had to deal with. And I don't think that was done. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Commissioner Kelly?
Well, I agree that I would like to proceed with granting the variance, and however we need to support it. It's an unusual area, it's an unusual project. We're not talking about a tract of land where all of the have the same view, they're all the same shape, size, and there are a lot of different uses in those areas. So again, we shouldn't be punishing the owner, and if we can try to find a way to make this right, I'm all in favor of it. So I agree with Commissioner Rodriguez and Commissioner Onstadt.
Commissioner Dukas?
Putting aside the mistakes that were made, because the applicant admitted he didn't see the 15-foot, and that that was the first mistake. Just putting that aside, though, I'm trying to imagine what would have happened if this had come before us strictly as a variance, and whether or not we could make those findings. So, toward that end, on the first one, I do think that there is an exceptional characteristic applicable to the subject property because of its size, its location in the community, and its function as almost like a gateway to the community, and that there are exceptional views that are offered that would not be offered if instead you looked at a big, tall, blue shed. So I do think that we can make the first finding. I do not think that the variance confers a special privilege because of the same findings that I made on the first one. The location of the property in the tract, it's the tree cover, and the window of the view of the mountains. I think that there's, I don't know how else to say it, that there's no special privilege inconsistent with the other properties in the area. Also, I also wanted to point out that we do have evidence that they built without a soils inspection, but they built to the max of what could be built. And the fact that there's 100 feet away is a fire hydrant, it passed building and safety, so it doesn't present any danger. It doesn't introduce a danger like a fire source or something. And especially since, no one will be living in there. So I think that's on finding 4, that it won't be detrimental to the public health, but we had that already. The finding number 3, the strict application of the minimal parcel size, I do think that it's smaller than the mean. It's the way that I looked at it, it was one of the smallest parcels in the whole area. And it's notable that you can't see this until you're almost right on top of it. And we do have the support of neighbors who have no objection, other than the fact that they're open to new colors. So perhaps we can ask the property owner to work with the neighborhood. It seems like they have an excellent relationship, and see if they want to paint it, leave it blue or paint it a lighter blue or any of the other things, however they decide to deal with it. But I do think that the most important thing is its location, and that it kind of tucks in and is camouflaged by the trees there. So I'm wondering if that's sufficient, if those are sufficient findings to make the decision for a variance.
How about before we get permission of staff, we use our judgment here, because I think I can support what you're trying to do here.
Yes, I do too.
Okay.
I think you've made sufficient findings.
Okay. The number one finding, I'm going to, if I may, is the fact that we believe there are exceptional characteristics that are applicable to this property, and it comes both out of the representation of the applicant and Mr. Thompson's testimony as far as the view of the older trees that are present. Number two, request would now confer special privilege inconsistent with the limitations on other properties in the same vicinity. It's an R2. This is obviously 0.66, as can be found in the staff report, so it's almost a third of the size of the others. So therefore, because of its uniqueness, it won't prefer a special privilege because it's limited in what it can do on that specific property. So I find in the staff own report that it's a legal lot, but the zoning says it's RE2. So but then we get to number three, for the strict application of minimum parcel size requirements and building intensity, if it's applied, okay, in other words, the setbacks, it will present a practical difficulty and an unnecessary hardship inconsistent with the general purpose of the general requirements and standards. Again, I find that within the staff report of the small size of the lot, for them to have put this anyplace else would create an undue burden by imposing those standards for the RE2. Okay, so and then as far as item number 4, staff already agrees. There's a finding to support that. So in my opinion, based on the facts that I have, both in the staff report and the testimony I've received, I think we can make the findings to uphold the variance.
Is that a motion?
Would you like to make the motion based, because I'm the chair, I have to hold it. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt your deliberations, but we also, if you're going to make an approval decision, we got to make a CEQA finding. I would suggest that you also find that the project's exempt from the CEQA pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15303E. That's for small accessory structures, such as garages, and this is very similar to it.
Thank you for the technical update.
So we can agree with the staff recommendations for 1, 2, and 5, and then make findings differently for 3 and 4.
And make the findings that I've represented that were found in the staff report.
Well, the basis for the CEQA finding is a little different.
Is it? Okay.
Because they're originally recommending that it's exempt from CEQA because they're recommending denial, and now you're finding that it's exempt from CEQA. You're approving the project, but it's exempt because of the small accessory exemption.
So we would change that. Okay.
And I would recommend that we, I would defer to staff on this also, that we continue the hearing.
Yes.
To come back with the findings, the evidence, and we'll come back with the proper documentation to the next planning commission hearing, just to make sure that everything, all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. Okay. But obviously today you need to make the decision here. Okay.
So moving forward with a motion then, we will move to continue this hearing. Pardon?
Are you going to grant the variance?
First, we've got to approve the variance and then continue the hearing. No?
No, procedurally, I believe what would be the best course of action is continue the hearing, to direct us to go back and prepare the approval documents with the conditions and the findings based upon what you provided us today, return to you with that information, and then you could, assuming that you approve of what we prepare for you, you could rely upon that to actually make your approval of the variance at that point in time. If you want to expedite things, I'm looking at county council, maybe we could put this on a consent agenda in the future if that's appropriate. Unless you feel like you want to deliberate some more, we could just put it back on the regular agenda. I mean, I'm just trying to
Well, the only deliberation would be whether or not we disagreed with the findings that we've directed.
I'm sorry, excuse me?
The only reason I could see us continually deliberate is if we
Didn't like what we produced. Yeah, so you could pull it off the consent agenda and put it on the regular agenda if you disagreed at that point in time. You don't have to do that, but it's just, so I don't have to sit around and go through the whole hearing.
I'm pretty sure you have to continue the hearing.
No,
I can't say that I'm positive about that, but I'm pretty sure you have to continue the hearing until the next, and keep it open, and then come back and allow additional comment if there is any, and then discussions, and then it should be short, obviously. We have no disagreement.
Well, I'm of the mind, and I appreciate council's representation, that there should be clarity on the facts that are used in making the findings. As far as continuing for additional deliberation, I think I hear sufficient evidence up here. There's no concern, there's been no represented concern, other than staff properly documenting, but in the past trying to hold technically to the line, which is their job. But as far as this body, we feel there's sufficient facts to support the findings. So my recommendation would be to continue it, to have staff bring it and make it a consent calendar item. Okay. Again, because then the applicant situation. So, is everybody totally confused? No. Good. My job's done.
We have to direct staff to do something.
But the motion I'd like to hear is that we direct staff to make the findings based on what we represented, okay, for approval of the variance, and direct them back to, at the next meeting, as a consent calendar item. Would you like to make that motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second. Any further discussion? Not hearing any? All those in favor, vote.
Now, wait a minute.
Hang on.
For it?
Sorry,
For
Ann.
it?
I'm sorry.
Now, how do we do this? Because this was an application button for a variance, and they denied. The staff report was no, and now.
We have directed staff to bring it back with the findings.
Okay. So what's the vote?
So as soon as she's got it, the vote is
Support the motion.
to bring it back with the findings.
For
Back from
approval of
representation.
variance and
So
direct
that's a
variance.
yes.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, everybody's happy with that? Anything else? Okay.
You can abstain.
All right. Congratulations. Just for a matter of information, we are pretty dark, as far as I know, through the rest of August and probably early September. So please check with county staff when the next available meeting would be. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen.
Wait a second. Whoa.
Well, we still haven't.
How far are we setting you back?
One question, that's a question I have.
Yeah, that is another question.
Ask your question for the bolts.
No, hang on.
Hold on, we got to discuss it up here.
How long are we delaying them to?
I do not know when our next meeting is.
Good question.
Yeah, I'm looking to Miss Hall. She's the keeper of the calendar, so I don't know when the next hearing is scheduled.
Don't feel any pressure.
The 17th of August? 17th of September.
No, we've got to do something.
Well, we have to have sufficient time to notice.
Wow.
I have a question, County Council.
Actually,
Continue.
there's no notice
We don't
required.
have to renotice it.
Oh, that's right, it's a continuance. Thank you. Thank you.
So we're not going to bring it back until...
Well, no, that's the discussion now is,
Okay.
since it's a continuance, we don't have a notice issue, we can just...
Okay, I have a question, County Council. Given the fact there's a stop order on this, and I'm not sure what the continuation date is going to be, and given the direction the commission appears to be going on this, is there anything prohibiting, or do we have the authority to direct that the stop construction order be lifted?
How can you do that without making the finding?
Well, I don't think
Okay,
we have
that's what I'm
that
asking.
jurisdiction.
Yeah,
It certainly would be in the discretion of the building official to lift the stop order, considering the direction of the planning commission.
And I see Mr. McDonald stepped out. However, if it's your commission's direction, I could go check with him about that. My guts tell me he'd be very amenable to allowing them to
I see
proceed,
Mr.
given
Stevens
your
step to the
decision
podium,
today.
so-
Okay, before he does...
And Mr. Stevens is here. He's the...
Chris, just so...
He can make a
The clerk
decision.
has indicated that the 6th is available for everybody.
Sixth of what?
This month, next week.
Yeah.
All right. Since this is a continued item?
Yeah.
Okay. August. Would the director like to weigh in before we get too far afield?
Well, we've done this in the past, and we have another little discussion here on the general plan. During that period, if staff has the time to take 15, 20 minutes to prepare those findings, I would suggest that they do so, come back to you, and you can take an action today. And
no pressure over there.
Can you do that, staff?
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. I'm looking to Mr. Souter here. It's going to be an interesting lunchtime. Yeah, we could see what we could cook up for you. How long is your presentation going to be, Mr. Stevens?
How long would...
we can go to lunch and come back.
And they can, after my presentation, they can always take a break and come back. So, how long?
We'll do our best. We'll see you in
Okay, I'll tell you what, can you bring it back at 10 minutes to 12?
Get right on that.
Okay.
No, in all
I
seriousness.
need to move something if it's going to take longer than that.
Give us, I'm thinking 1:15. Is that okay, or is that too much of a delay for this hearing?
Give them time to do it.
Well, then the chair's going to have to step off, and so the vice chair will have to take over.
Oh.
Well, that would leave three of you. All right.
Well, here's another possibility.
I tell you what, let me see if I can move my, go ahead, Chris, talk, and let me see what I can do about me staying.
Try to count that, Tom.
Well, I'm thinking out loud here. Maybe we could go ahead and take the action of approving the variance right now based on the findings that were made by, you all articulated a number of findings, and based on the evidence in the record, and then we will come back with basically we'll just be writing them up based on what you already said and what was already in the record, and bring that back for, I'm just trying to think.
Ratification?
Well, could it just...
I was thinking that at the next hearing.
Perhaps as part of the minutes, review of the minutes of this meeting, we'll set forth everything that you said. If you disagree with what stated, you want to make edits to it, you can make the edits to the minutes prior to approving the minutes of this hearing.
Because it would just be a clerical recitation of what you've already said anyway.
That doesn't hold you up, doesn't hold the applicant up.
I mean, I think that would work.
I don't see any disagreement going to happen here.
So we do need to make a different motion then. We need to undo that one.
Would this make a motion to rescind her motion?
I'll make a motion to rescind the previous motion.
Does the second support it? Do the rest of the voters support it? Yes. All right, the motion is rescinded. The chair will entertain a new motion.
All right, now how do I phrase this one? Move to approve the variance
based on the findings
based on the findings we discussed at this meeting, and direction to staff to prepare final ratification at the next meeting.
With the appropriate CEQA finding.
With the appropriate CEQA finding.
Okay.
Were there any other documents we need to enter into the record that was submitted?
Everything that we had in PowerPoint, the testimony by Mr. Thompson and the others are already in the record. Okay. All right, have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second. Discussion on the motion? Okay. Went too fast again, didn't we, Anna? No, it's not.
That's some fast footwork.
Okay. Welcome to the world of government action. All right, thank you. Thank County Council and staff for helping us move this along, particularly the support of the director of RMA. Let's always have the big guy talk. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a little bit more business. Thank you. Enjoy your time. And good luck with the color.
Yeah.
I want to see the invisible one. That one I'm really interested in.
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
After what I saw what Disney did downtown LA with their mirrors.
Oh, yeah.
They almost cooked one of the buildings across the street. Discuss that with staff. Staff, that will be.
Oh.
Thank you all. We do need to proceed. Have a marvelous time.
An excellent job, sir. You did a
Great
fine
job.
job.
And kak de busje bij.
Oh, give them their moment.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you could be pleased to be quiet. We need to conduct a little extra business. Wow, we get you twice in one day, sir. It's almost like you were back on the commission.
Yeah. What? Well, we're just talking back and forth.
No, I'm just saying because of the outside world now can reach in, that they're listening. You know, I find it fascinating.
He's getting prompted by his...
No, I'm not getting prompted. What I'm getting is, how soon are we going to lunch?
What's that say? You've got to be kidding. Oh.
And this is from the boss.
I got that one last week.
Notice the wife.
All right. Good morning again.
Good morning.
Still
Good
morning.
morning.
And thanks for the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about the general plan update. It's just a follow-up to the joint session that was held and that I think you're all there except for Commissioner Dukas. I don't know if you had a chance to watch the video.
I watched the video.
Very good. Okay. Just take a couple minutes for you, and then we can spend as much time as you like on questions and answers. I thought we had I hope the commissioners felt that we had a very good joint study session. We asked the consultants to take their time and walk through the general plan really from A to Z, so everyone was well grounded and had a good foundation from which to build this project from. I think they did a very good job, and the discussion from the board and the commissioners was extremely helpful. The board directed us to, or I should say, offered us the opportunity to come back to them on August 4th to seek any additional clarification that we feel we might need in order to take the next step to prepare the scope of work. We are taking them up on their offer, and we will be coming back to the board next Tuesday afternoon. I believe it is a time certain item at 3 o'clock. And I'll highlight for you a couple of the issues that we want to get further direction from the board on, and if you would like to offer any comments, that would be great, and we would definitely share those with the board next week. One of them was on the issue of an economic development element or economic development chapter. There was some discussion at the hearing on July 7th about that. Because we had so much material to cover, we didn't go into a lot of detail on any single aspect, and this, I think, was an example of that. There was not time to kind of get into the details of what an economic development element or chapter might look like. So we're going to take some time next Tuesday with the board. We've gone through a number of them in the state, found one that we thought was a particularly good example, Merced County. We're going to provide a copy of that for the board just so they can get a sense of what an economic development element or chapter could look like, and then ask them to provide us some additional direction. The element in the Merced County one, it covers things about, focuses on the agricultural economy. They are an agricultural county like ourselves. Talks about farm worker and workforce housing, the tourism, agritourism in particular, but tourism in general, also relevant here to Ventura. Talks about county fiscal conditions, existing business expansion, retention. So a number of these kind of, I'll call them general economic issues, as well as talking about partnerships and the importance of and options for forming partnerships, both with the cities or with private entities to improve the economy. So it's a wide range of issues, but we wanted to give the board that example of the Merced County, so they could look at it and provide us some additional feedback on that issue. We also received a letter from the Economic Development Collaborative of Ventura County encouraging the board to consider preparing a economic development element specifically. So we'll be sharing that with the board as well. Another issue, if you recall talking about, was the preparation of area plan updates. Again, that was an issue that we kind of had to cover in general terms, and the consultants talked about it and kind of threw out this blanket number of, and I can't remember the number, I'll say $500,000 per area plan update. Clearly the board wanted some additional specificity, and we shared with them at that time that we didn't think that that was a number that would apply to every single area plan, and that every area plan would need to be updated immediately. And so we've spent a little time to go in and look at them in more detail and give the board a little more kind of detailed estimate, as well as some options about how they might approach those area plans, and a little more detail on each of those, so we can have a little more complete discussion of that issue and direction from the board. Just to refresh your memory, there were, I think, 3 options they talked about. One was just a simple reformatting of the area plans. One was, in addition to that, reformatting and integrating them into the general plan. And then the last was a complete update of each of those. So we've laid out those options for the board, their costs in a little more detail, and asking them for a little further direction on that as well. The other issue, somewhat related to that, was the alternatives analysis, and whether or not there were going to be what we'll call kind of, full land use alternatives to be looked at. The discussion, in early July was at the joint session, was that it seemed unlikely that such alternatives would be required given the policies here in the county. But they wanted to kind of explore that a little further, and we talked about kind of focused alternate land use alternatives, and they might be within our existing communities, which would be within our area plan areas. So we're putting together some additional information for the board to consider how that might work. Our feeling at this point is there's no reason to make a commitment to do those at this time. That's something that can kind of play out through the process and see whether that makes sense. But we, as I said, put a little more meat on the bones and give them a sense of where we think some things may or may not work in the future, and then highlight for them, something I'll share with you, is that we think that if we were to go to some of those kind of focused area alternatives, that the North Ventura Avenue area plan is probably, it's one of our oldest area plans, and it's also an area that has, I might say maybe more development potential than our other areas, and that might be one that they may want to focus on. But again, I think as we get through the process, it will define and identify whether that's really something that should be pursued concurrently with the general plan update. And then lastly, an issue that came up at the joint session was related to community surveys and whether or not we should be doing some surveys as part of the general plan update. So the consultant gathered some more details on survey types. There's a whole, there's the telephone survey, the mail survey, the online survey. So we've gathered some more information for the board. The consultant will share some of their more detailed experiences using those surveys, and we have some cost estimates, and to try and get a little more direction from the board on those issues. So that's just a quick summary of what we expect to talk with the board about next week. And if you have any thoughts you'd like to share, I'd be happy to pass them along to the board.
Okay. I concur with the director. I wish we'd had more time, but when we're trying to do the whole general plan for the entire county for the next 40 years in 4 hours, got a little tight. So that's why I request we have a little bit of time here. We've had some time to reflect upon what we heard or didn't hear. Was not expecting the big gun to come down, so thank you very much. I'm just going to open up. We do have one speaker card that I'd like to, but any thoughts, reflections?
I have a question.
Commissioner Onsat?
Where are we? We were talking about an agricultural element, which is near and dear to the hearts of my folks out my way. Where's that stand?
That we talked about that at the joint session, and our takeaway was that the board and the commission were very interested and supportive of that, and so we didn't identify that as an issue we felt needed further fleshing out on the 4th. It's something that I anticipate being within the recommended scope of work that will come back to the board at a later date.
And where would water fit into all of that?
Well, water, that was another issue that
thereof.
there was a lot of interest in. We talked about that at the joint session as well. And again, our takeaway was that the board and the commissioners were very supportive of us addressing that either within its own standalone element or chapter, or certainly it could be in association with the agricultural element. I mean, those kind of details we can work out a little further down the road, but clearly it's an issue vitally important to the county, and the direction we heard was it needs to be addressed within the general plan update.
Thank you, sir.
Richard?
I think your comments sound great, and I appreciate hearing that you're going to seek out partnerships with various entities they're going to have. In particular, the city of Ventura seems to be critical in this particular stage. We just went through, obviously, the Santa plan, and the linchpin is water, and i.e. the city of Ventura. And since we're going to do be doing the update on the North Ventura Avenue plan, that'll likely be developed, it's critical that we somehow mesh with whatever is there, and they're clearly aware of what's going on. So.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have to work hand in glove with the city on that.
Yeah.
On that as well.
Commissioner Kelly, anything?
Well, I was just, this didn't come up, but I think it might be beneficial to look at maybe incorporating something into the general plan about promoting solar and other types of energy conservation and production. And since we're looking 40 years out, there may be things out there that are currently under development or things that are going to come up that we don't even know about that we want to make room for incorporating into land use and development.
Yeah, that issue was kind of, it might be a subset or kind of, I don't want to say hidden, but it was discussed very, very briefly under what was kind of more generally referred to as a sustainability element. If you remember that discussion that the consultant talked about, that also was one that there seemed to be general agreement as our takeaway that needs to be addressed in the plan. So that will certainly be a consideration that we can kind of, as we move further down the road, define better and highlight how we're going to address it. But it's certainly part of the package.
Okay, and one more thing, are we looking at keeping a separate hazard section, or are we still?
The actual we have to address hazards. That is a requirement, a state requirement. We will continue to do so. How it appears in the document, I don't know that I'm ready to say, but at this point, the consultants generally were suggesting that we reorient the plan to make our elements more in line with as they're defined by the state, as opposed to how our general plan is currently organized, which would make it more consistent with those in the cities and maybe a little more intuitive. And hazards would be addressed in that manner is perhaps what I might say at this point where we're headed. But
I know we talked about whether to have, the separate elements or an integrated approach for things. I guess that's still under discussion. Mm-hmm. And maybe a question that we didn't ask the consultants, as far as updating, is it easier or does it make any difference with the use of technology to update things, whether it's separate or integrated? But that's just a...
Yeah, one of the key elements within their proposal, which again we heard great support for, was to get this up to modern standards and have it all available online and much more easier to navigate and easier to update. So regardless of the form that it might take, the recommendation within the scope of work will be to put all of those things in place so that it's much easier to navigate and follow and amend or change as well in the future.
Okay. And then something that occurred to me, and maybe this isn't maybe this is too specific, but is there a place or a thought to putting into place certain parameters, and I'm thinking of hazards, for certain conditions, for instance, with the current water situation? Well, when it gets to this level, then these measures are triggered, so that there's something in place that we can consider logical progressions of things. If we're expecting a flood year and what measures are in place. I know there's just sort of a general emergency procedures, but just, and before it becomes an emergency, that's just the thought.
Yeah, I know there's been a lot of work done in other communities and other counties along the lines of responding to the drought or any of these other items that come along. We can include policies, programs, goals, within the general plan that may outline how to do those things. And I've looked at a number of sample general plans. There's a lot of latitude, and so some general plans are very high level, wouldn't get into that level of detail. Others that I've read are incredibly detailed in terms of their policies, that, okay, when X happens, we will do Y and Z, and so that is really a decision to be made by yourselves as well as the board as the program develops and the general plan update kind of matures. But it's certainly something that we can do, and the issue is certainly one we're going to want to address. What form it takes, again, it's a little early to tell.
Anything out of your studies? Oh, okay, since I'm the one to kind of push this, but again, I thank for everybody's input. I think it was informative. The big thing is, remember, this is an overarching document with a very long horizon. If we were to back up 40 years, okay, we'd be sitting here 1975 saying, what's this 2015 going to look like? And I look over that and I sit there and go, a lot, okay? And so to have that kind of visioning, like Steele saying, if I knew then what I know now kind of thing. So I try to keep that perspective, try to not take the immediate to make the detail too harsh, because a little bit of what we saw today, unfortunately what happened to two departments, the technology today would allow us to catch a lot of those things. The plan we have now is 1988, and that was based on people that were trained in 1968, 1978. And I don't fault them. That's just the way it is. But so I try to keep that overarching, and with that, I'd like to bring forward the level of alternative analysis. I agree with you. We have to, as I pointed out at the meeting, if we go to phase 5, which is the EIR, that to me brings back standards through phases 1 through 4 that I think will be helpful in the process, particularly with Supervisor Parks and Bennett wanting this done in 36 months. I see the smile. I appreciate that, because if they hold everybody's feet to the fire, there's an accountability. Otherwise, this could be the never-ending story. I'll be talking to a new director when I'm working on my 100-year pin here. So I hear all that. As far as the area plans, I agree, only the North Avenue. The rest of them, I think once this general plan, if it's even done in 36 months, those can make more sense and to tackle them at the right time. So I would agree with that. The big thing is we have to integrate these elements. We talked about ag and water. The one, as far as the economic, to me, it's a linchpin because of the housing. The housing, right now, our general plan says the cities are going to do it, particularly when it comes to farm worker housing, which we have an ordinance for. And since we've had it, how many applications have we had? None that I know of. So if agriculture is our big dog in this county, and we have to have people to work it, where are they going to live? If we're going to say, well, the city's going to take care of it, that to me is, we get into the catch-22 again. So I think the economic development is critical to this, because ag has to be looked at as an industry, not a park service. And if we can't provide the housing that the average farm worker, I have no idea what the median income of a farm worker in this county is right now. But one of the things I know when I'm supporting greenhouses, when the folks from Vancouver came in, is we can produce more product on a smaller footprint that's less invasive, and they keep a stable, better educated workforce year round. So I get back to if we're going to do that, I agree with the economic, because I know some people say we can't drive the bus by money. Well, if we can't afford to keep ag alive because we don't have the housing that people can afford, it gets into that circular route. So I personally would support that. And then finally, the survey, I agree with that. Constant information, particularly in today's market. The only thing I did when I reviewed the comments, they tended to be from pretty vocal, dominant small groups. Okay, and once upon a time in the early 90s, we were going to come up with an architectural standard for the county, but it was based on what Ojai wanted. And as we discussed, what Port Hueneme and Lockwood Valley, very difficult to do. So those surveys, though I feel they're extremely valuable, we tend to get certain people that do that. So more surveys, yeah, but I don't know if I helped you, Chris, but the economic with the housing, the ag, all the water and everything else will flow out of those. But overall, like I said when I first meeting, and I'll be quiet, is it's got to be a forward-looking document as best as we can, because then whoever sits here is going to get what staff said today. On the non-coastal zoning ordinance, you must make these findings, these findings, these findings, and they all relate back to the general plan. And so it helps us do policies, ordinances, decisions. And with that type of arching attitude, I think we can really get someplace. And as long as you're done in 36 months. And of course, an unlimited budget and unlimited staff. So that's the only thing I would bring back is they may be able to blend a couple of the alternatives, but I think they're quintessential to the other 7 elements that a general plan has to have. And if I can't say anything else, that housing issue has got to be addressed, both from an economic and an agricultural standard. And I won't even begin to talk about the low-income housing issue that we're responsible for, but we have no control over. That's okay. All right, with that, we have one speaker. If you would like to, Ms. Jensen would like to come down. And if the director would like to tell the supervisors, the chair just went off, don't pay attention. It's all right with you. Lynn, your name for the record, please.
Lynn Jensen, I'm representing Ventura County CoLab today.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate being able to make the comments today. I agree very much with what you said, Mr. Wessner. This general plan update is very important to the agricultural industry, and I think the policies that are adopted in this general plan for the next 30 or 40 years, I'm not sure they've decided the time frame yet, are really going to determine whether we have agriculture here in 40 years. And that economic development element is absolutely critical, because it's one thing to talk about agriculture and talk about policies, but it's not just agriculture out there. There's an oil industry out there. There's mining out there. There's actually organics processing. There's all kinds of businesses out there. And for the county to say, well, all the businesses are going to be in the cities is not really the case. There's 100,000 acres of irrigated agriculture here. And it takes all kinds of infrastructure to make that happen and to be able to keep up with the rest of the world in terms of how agricultural products are distributed and what the people want. I mean, really, a lot of it is consumer-driven these days. So I know it's been a long day. I don't want to go on, but I really do believe that the economic development element is important for this county, in addition to a separate agricultural element that will take care of some of the other things going on there. And, of course, the water element. I was actually just reading the Sonoma County water element, and it's very interesting, the kinds of policies that they came up with there. And in terms of land use alternatives, again, there's a lot of things that may need to change in the land use section in order to help agriculture survive here. And I think that should be part of the land use alternatives. And again, there's green waste processing, there's some need for some different facilities for ag, and perhaps there are some for the mining and oil industry as well. So I think we ought to keep that in mind, and to make these policies, like you say, overarching, not necessarily so specific that we're tied to them in the future, and then we get ourselves in a situation where we can't change something that we need to in order to make it happen. I mean, I know in my lifetime things have really speeded up, and it's so different with the internet and all the things you look at even 10 years ago. To try to determine what's really going to happen in 40 years, I think is a stretch in any case, but I think we want to be careful with how specific we are. So I appreciate the EDC-VC also weighing in on the economic element, and I'm glad that we're going to be talking about that again at the Board of Supervisors, which I will attend on Tuesday. So thank you so much.
Thank you for coming down and helping out. I find it fascinating. We have these big discussions, and I see staff and one interest. and that it's going to affect the next 40 years. Sometimes I just want to scream at some people, but it's not sexy, it's not exciting. I get all of that.
Well, it's very difficult to explain. I mean, we have 400 members, and we talk about it all the time, and as soon as you say the word general plan, everybody's eyes glaze over and they don't understand. And land use and policy and, all those things, it's really difficult. But when they go and they take a project like came to you today, and then you have to be consistent with the zoning ordinance and the general plan and all the other requirements, this language has to be carefully worded to make sure that we support agriculture in this county the way we should. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything else, Mr. Director? Okay. All right. Anything else you'd like the director to take back to the supervisors next week? Okay, not hearing any. I wish we had more time, personally. But please take back that the commission has to live with whatever's decided.
Well, yeah, and I appreciate that we need more time. I think you'll have plenty of time. As you say, it will not be 36 months, but it's going to be a long process. There will be a lot of check-ins with the Planning Commission. The board made the decision to say we have a planning commission, we have a group of people that can serve as the hearing body and kind of the leaders of this process, and so that's you. You're going to be hearing a lot from staff, not from me, probably from the planning director and others. I'm just pinch hitting today, but you're going to be hearing a lot from staff over the next, we'll say 48 months plus on the topic, so you'll have lots of opportunity.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. We certainly appreciate your time, as always. Anything else for the good of the order? Anything that Director Prilhart wants?
Well, thank you for allowing me to sit in for Kim, but at the moment, no, there's nothing else to update.
Okay. Well, text her and Peru for us, please.
Sure, she's going to want to text on this.
Yeah. They did it again. That's all you got to say. All right. Anything from the commissioners for the good of the order? Hearing none. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This meeting's adjourned. See you on the 17th of September.